Welcome back. This is 37G again. I'm William Garrison.
And I'm Michael Aune.
This is part 2 of our Dragon's Maze spoiler, the latest expansion of Magic the Gathering. Last time we covered the colored sets of the cycle, white, blue, black, red, and green. And then we also briefly talked about the artifacts and lands that are in the set.
Yep.
Today we're going to cover the rest of the cards that have been spoiled, which all of the cards have been spoiled at this point, so that's why we're doing the review.
Yep.
Giving you some basic feedback about what we feel from our experience, like what cards will be great, what cards will be good, and then what cards will just suck ass. So we'll start. We're going to go through all the gold cards, which includes the multicolored split cards, most of which, like, one side is one color, the other side is another color. Yeah. We'll talk about mechanics and stuff like that as well. So,
yep.
Right off the bat, it's Advent of the Worm. It's an instant 4 converted mana cost. It's 1 green, green, white. Put a 5/5 green worm creature token onto the battlefield, and that creature token has trample. It's a rare, which is pretty obvious because the fact that you're at instant speed paying 4 mana for a 5/5 trampling worm, this is one of the best combat tricks in the set.
Yeah. It's like a creature buff, except you get to keep it afterwards. It's like a giant growth that stays around for a while.
It's amazing. And
it's a population target for the next turn, too, in Selesnya.
Yeah.
Oh, man, this card's got all sorts of potential, and I could see this potentially ending up standard.
I think it will, just because mid-range decks have been doing so well for so long, creature-based decks, and there's not really, in just green and white, other than Restoration Angel, there's really not a better way to spend 4 mana. So I think it's fantastic, and it gives you some interesting synergies with other cards like Prime Speaker Zagana, or just anything wanting a large body like Thragtusk has been serving for so long.
I mean, you could drop this at the end of your opponent's turn 4, turn 5 drop Zagana. Yeah. She's a 5-drop, right?
She's a 6, but a lot of those decks runs, like, they still have Arbor Elves and stuff. Yeah. So yeah, he's awesome.
Yeah, I will happily play that.
Yeah.
Except that I don't like Selesnya much. So I probably won't. I'm a Rakdos, or I'm a Gruul, or I'm a Goros guy. I like Gruul with some Boros. That's been the best combo for me in this set so far. Though Orzhov's been a ton of fun.
Yeah.
All of the extort. Because I like math, apparently. Anyway, next up, Armored Wolf Rider. He's a 4/6 Elf Knight for 3 green and a white, and that is all he is. So, at a 5-drop in Selesnya for a non-token creature, I mean, it's not bad. It's got a big butt, and it's not too pricey for what you get, but he's just a filler, basically, in a deck.
It's from a development standpoint, he's a 5/5 for 5 that they just skewed slightly to make him more interesting.
Yep.
So you'll more than happy to play him to fill your curve. So
yeah. Ascended Law Mage, more fun in my opinion. That is an Azorius card, 2 a white and a blue for a 3/2 flying hexproof Vedalken wizard. I will play this all day, every day.
The good thing about hexproof creatures, at least in the current standard format, are pretty few and far between.
Yeah. And flying is just another way that it's like another way it just stays out of reach of your opponent. So that's just sort of mean, but it's just loaded with value at a 4-drop.
I think this is a little bit too pricey or not board effective enough to be playable in standard, but
yeah.
You're just going to ruin your opponents with this in limited, just because removal is kind of hard to come by in the first place, but even when they top deck removal, they can't target this guy.
Yeah, and unless you got a board wipe.
Board wipes are not common in removal, and there are none in none in Dragon's Maze.
Yeah.
So they'll have to find some other ways around it, like blocking it.
Yeah.
But next up is Beetle Form Mage. It's a 1 green and a blue. It's a human insect wizard creature. I just wanted to read that because that's long as hell.
That's
Jesus.
Pretty awesome.
It's a 2/2, so from the vanilla test, it's a 2/2 for 3.
Yeah. But that's not why you play this guy, though.
Right. You pay green and a blue. He gets 2/2 +2/2 and flying until end of turn. you can only activate it once. What's interesting is, unlike some of the other activated abilities, it doesn't say you can only use it anytime you could a sorcery.
Yeah.
So basically, they can't effectively fly into your battlefield if you have the open mana, because you just pump, jump up, and block them.
Yeah.
The fact that you can, what I'm trying to say is the fact you can use it on the offensive and the defensive is pretty powerful.
Yeah. I mean, he fits into Simic well. I mean, at the end of the day,
well, my only problem with him in Simic, I mean, he's obviously a Simic creature. It's got the Simic.
Yeah.
Is just like actually Frilled Oculus is a bad example, but any of these creatures in Simic that pump after they're already in the battlefield, that means they're not triggering Evolve in any way.
Yeah.
I just wish there was some way. It's like a kicker cost. I wish you could pay 2 more, and he would come into the battlefield with +2 and +2 and flying. But unfortunately, that just means that he'd be too cheap. You'd be paying 3 or paying 5 mana for a 4/4 flyer, which is it's okay.
I mean, to me, I'm still going to take a Drakewing Krasis over this, because the 3/1 triggers Evolve and it casts Trample, and so there's so many ways to combo with that with Simic. But barring having a bunch of those, if you're spreading the wealth at 3-drop, I'm totally fine to play this. I mean, I will probably have 1 or 2 in a Simic deck.
Yeah, this guy's a little bit more versatile than Drakewing Krasis, but Drakewing is obviously a better attacker. So,
well, just Drake, that 3 on turn 3 is what's going to trigger something to evolve. A 2 on turn
especially
3
because Cloudfin Raptors are so good, and they have a larger toughness than power. So,
I mean, to me, it'll be interesting to see if you're playing the draft and you got Cloudfins in there. We'll see how that goes.
Plus, I like Human Insect Wizards.
Who doesn't?
It's a creature type that hasn't been explored very well. So
this man insect wizard is reaching, man. He's really trying to put himself out there.
All right. Well, that takes us to Blast of Genius. It's a 6 cost, so 4, a blue and a red. Sorcery. Choose target creature or player. Draw 3 cards, then discard a card. Blast of Genius deals damage equal to the discarded card's converted mana cost to that creature or player. It's pretty powerful because it's essentially, most of the time, you're destroying a creature, or at least that's what you want to do.
It's like a fireball plus card draw.
And you're basically drawing 2. The fact that you don't have to discard the card before drawing is good.
Yep.
I don't like the fact that you have to choose the target first, because if you've got a handful of nothing, you have to hope that you go into something. But
it's just that it would be so... I mean, the fact that you can choose means you can have something in hand, then use this, knowing what you're going to toss.
I just mean it would be more powerful if it was the other way around.
Well, yeah.
But I understand.
But it'd also be really powerful.
Right.
I mean, I could see people... There would be a lot you could do with that. I mean,
but this is already a card I'll definitely want to play one of if I'm playing in these colors.
Yeah, it's a finisher. You don't want to rely on it for anything, but when you need it, it'll do a lot of work for you.
The art's awesome, and yeah, it's pretty awesome.
Yeah. Blaze Commando, next up. 5-drop, 3 a red and a white for a 5/3 Minotaur Soldier. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, whenever an instant or sorcery spell you control deals damage, put 2 1/1 red and white soldier creature tokens with haste onto the battlefield. This guy could give Boros something it doesn't have, which is a mid-game, a late game, because you could just start... There's plenty of burn you're going to be able to snag. I mean, if you can get him early and build into him a little bit, making sure you keep some of that, not so much the white removal, but a little bit of the red, I think he could be very interesting. He's a 5/3 for 5, which in Boros is not bad value, because you don't have much with a big anything, really.
Right.
And the fact that just sitting there doing nothing, you can start spitting out 2 tokens at a time with haste. I like it a lot.
And if you happen,
you can do it before combat to wipe a creature off the board, drop 2 1/1 hastes, and swing.
We just talked about we just talked about Blast of Genius. If you happen to be in those 3 colors, you drop him on turn 5, you Blast of Genius on turn 6. You're drawing cards, you're creating creatures, and you're swinging in for a bunch. It's got some interesting synergy with some other cards.
I think it's going to be a lot of fun. He won't be playable out of limited, but that's
But
fine.
like a lot of commons and uncommons,
But it'll be a ton of fun in limited.
Yeah.
That's all I really care about, so that's fine.
Yep. Speaking of cards that might see some play in out of limited, Blood Baron of Vizkopa, 3, a white and a black, so 5 converted mana cost.
My white-black deck might have fun, finally.
He's a vampire. He's a 4/4 vampire. He has lifelink, protection from white and black.
So screw you, direct removal.
As long as you have 30 or more life and an opponent has 10 or less life, he gets +6/+6 in flying.
This is just made for Orzhov. It's so on flavor.
I'm not 100% sure in Standard where he's going to see play, but I have a feeling he might fit in some Esper control decks because you're already running Sphinx's Revelation. You already have so much card draw and removal and
with
stuff.
like Rock's Faithbender still out there for a few months. I mean, that could combo very, very quickly.
It might be easy to get to the 30 life. Getting to the 10 or less life, though, like the fact that you have to do both might... But just him being a 4/4 lifelink or protection from white and black is good. Protection in general isn't something that you see on cards in Standard a lot. So
no more chump blocking with a Resto or anything like that.
Yeah, even if you see it just in sideboard play, it'll be pretty awesome because you're going to bring it in. If they're playing those colors, you bring the card in. You've suddenly got this card that their deck can't do anything with. So it's pretty interesting. It'll be fun to play in limited. And
I mean, it's a bomb. It could wreck easily in limited, and I think it's got potential. We'll have to see. Of course, everything's up to rotation at this point, but the potential's there. That's for damn sure.
Yep.
Unlike Boros Battle Shaper, who is just too damn expensive. I mean, you're talking a 7-drop, 5 red and a white for a 5/5 Minotaur soldier, who reads at the beginning of each combat up to 1 target creature attacks or blocks this combat if able, and up to 1 target creature can't attack or block this combat. If it was limited to you, which I think it should be given that he's a 7-drop, I might be impressed a little bit. He's still way too expensive for Boros.
What do you mean if it was limited to you?
It's at the beginning of each combat.
Yeah, you get to choose, though, each combat. You're the controller of the creature, so you always choose. So it's like Angelic Skirmisher. It triggers at both combats, but you always choose. The important thing is, it's still expensive, don't get me wrong. He will never see constructed play. I can almost guarantee it.
I mean, I would probably leave him at limited just on cost alone for Boros, but...
And it also depends on what other guilds you're playing. Like, if you're not strong Boros, you would essentially... If I was playing Orzhov, you would splash red for this card. Yeah. He's strong enough.
I think the only problem for me, too, is if you're looking at white, and white's going to anchor this in some way, if that's in any way a key part of your deck, your creatures are smaller, kind of off the bat. So, against Gruul and stuff, even if you get to pick the trades, it can't necessarily come off that... Like, against Simic, that's not going to be useful by this point in the game. They're probably going to have stuff that's bigger than yours. So, yeah, you might get 1 or 2 free small guys off the board.
Well, in the case of this, what you do is all right...
He breaks the Boros stalemate, though.
Your 1/1 has to attack. Your 7/7 can't attack.
Yeah.
And then you block their 1/1 with the Battle Shaper.
Yeah.
What it does is it slightly improves combat in your favor.
Yeah.
Every combat.
So
it's not necessarily
Boros has to have won by the time this guy hits the board, or Boros has probably already lost.
Well, and maybe this was an answer to that. At least for some of the articles I've read and stuff, they expect this format to be slower slightly because of the spread, especially during the sealed, and because the cards themselves are not as fast.
Yeah. I'd rather though have him at like a 5-drop for a 2/2 that had the same ability, than bump up his power and toughness that much for a 7/7. Because he's just...
We'll see. I'll play him.
If you need that 22nd, 23rd card, he's a big butt, and that's the reason I'd play him more than anything. It's like if I'm reaching for just a creature that's bigger. His thing's a bonus, but I would not focus a deck on that by any means. It's just, I don't think.
Okay.
It's too late for me. Like, again, just if you're in those colors, man, you're dropping that. I just feel like you've done it wrong.
We'll have to see.
I'll get wrecked by him, and then I'll be back here like crying and weeping towards the camera. But that's fine. We can do that. That's what all of this is about: learning and guessing. And
the next card is Bred for the Hunt. It's 1, a green, and a blue. It's an enchantment. Whenever a creature you control with a +1/+1 counter on it deals combat damage to a player, you may draw a card. So obviously it's a Simic card. It's good if you have some evasion like the Drakewing Krasis, the Cloudfin Raptors. The stuff that's going to naturally evolve, you will draw cards. You have to be careful about cards like this because we talked about last episode that worst case scenario.
Yeah.
If you play this and then your next 4 creatures don't evolve in any way or don't have counters, then this is a dead card. You spent 3 mana and a card slot in your deck for something that doesn't.
You have
activate.
to be going basically just Simic.
Yeah.
I mean, you really cannot. You're not going to splash for this. So yeah, it could be great in the perfect Simic deck. Outside of that, every once in a while you'll get it. But since so few things have trample, and there's not great ways to give trample, they can chump block for days. Again, you wasted 3 mana to maybe draw a card or 2. To me, it's either a win-more condition or such an occasional bonus. I would not run this unless, again, I'm reaching towards the end of the deck. Just, meh. If you have the perfect Simic deck, cool, have fun. Otherwise, leave it in the sideboard.
Yeah.
More fun is Bronzebeak Moa, because Selesnya needed more things. It's a 2/2 for 2, a green and a white. It's a bird, for those who are curious. Whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, Bronzebeak Moa gets +3/+3 until end of turn, and this will be abused to no end. With all of the Populate and Selesnya, that is a back-breaking ability.
Populate we talked about yesterday, the Scion of Vitu-Ghazi, that he comes into play, spits out a bird, and then populates. So this effectively, like you play this on turn 4, the Vitu-Ghazi on turn 5.
You just got
this
an
guy
11/11.
An 11/11 that you paid 4 mana for.
Yeah. He's stupid value. I would play easily 2 in a deck in Selesnya.
Yeah. The only anytime you build a limited deck, you build your curve and you side in or side out cards, and whether or not they have synergies with things.
Yeah.
If you don't have any populate or anything that has enter the battlefield, like create another creature effect, this might be slightly less useful. But you still have to say that if you're on tempo and you're hitting creatures every turn he's going to get +3/+3.
Yep.
So I'll usually play him, at least one of them, even if I don't have a lot of populate. It's just if you do, then this guy's amazing.
Right, given that limited is so creature heavy.
Also, he looks exactly like a Chocobo in some ways, which for Final Fantasy fans is pretty awesome.
Yeah. Less awesome for anyone is Carnage Gladiator. And I don't want to say that because I don't really want to see this happen to me. 4/2 for 2, a black and a red. Whenever a creature blocks, that creature's controller loses 1 life. So super Rakdos flavor right there. And you can pay 1, a black and a red to regenerate him. That just screams Rakdos. He's got a bit more butt on him. Or, sorry, I should say not butt.
Front.
Giant sword wielding front
Weapon.
than Rakdos sometimes has.
In fact, on the left, it's a spike ball, like a ball with spikes coming out of it.
So it looks like a giant pickaxe.
Yeah.
Yeah. Pretty. Again, this just looks like a really fun card. It's one of those things, kind of like Rakdos Charm, where you could have creatures deal damage, to their controller.
Yeah.
It can hurt you, but the whole idea of Rakdos is a little pain's okay as long as they hurt more. And that to me is just a perfect card for this. I will happily play him. Probably only 1, but I just think he'll be a lot of fun. He'll make games interesting.
Next up is Council of the Absolute. It's a 2, a white and a blue. It's a human advisor. It's a 2/4. When it enters the battlefield, name a card other than a creature or land card. Your opponents can't cast cards with the chosen name. Spells with the chosen name you cast cost 2 less to cast.
This might have just said Sphinx's Revelation.
Sphinx's Revelation, in the colors, there are other things like board wipes, or it's basically it's an amazing sideboard card that you bring in against from the control or mid-range mirrors, where they're some kind of non-creature or non-land spell that every deck in the meta runs, and they can't play theirs. Yours costs less. It's
it's
pretty amazing.
The one who drops this first is going to make the other person unhappy. Because you're not going to attack with him and stuff, so Azorius Charm and all that, that's going nowhere. I mean, you're going to have to pull some direct removal there to get rid of him. And yeah, if you're just waiting on that first Sphinxes to go off to see who wins the game, then you probably just sealed it for you. I don't play this deck. I probably never will, but I will enjoy watching people get really frustrated when I'm watching and they have this cast against them. And
Sphinx's Revelation for 2 less.
Yeah.
You get 2 extra cards in life out of it.
Yeah.
It's pretty awesome.
Nuts. Next up, another mythic, Deadbridge Chant. It's Golgari themed here, which is just sad right off the bat. But anyway, it's 4 black and a green for an enchantment. When it enters the battlefield, you put the top 10 cards of your library into the graveyard. And at the beginning of your upkeep, you get to choose a card at random from your graveyard. If it's a creature card, you put it onto the battlefield. If it's anything else, you put it in your hand. It's mythic rare. I don't really see a home for it. To me, it's a little slow for Reanimator. The randomness hurts Reanimator. It's not bad, but
what it's going to do, I think, we talked about Travis Wu's decks a little bit yesterday. I think deck builders like him are going to make this work because Reanimator decks are going to take a little bit less from the mid-range. Like, they're going to cycle towards the low and the high end.
Yeah.
So you're usually going to get something with cards like this and Obsidat's Aid, which we haven't covered yet, but we'll talk about later. You're going to get something giant with this half of the time, especially with cards like Deathrite Shaman, which when this mills cards,
you can filter.
You're gonna filter the instants of sorceries and lands to cast other stuff anyways.
Yep.
Also, the fact that this enchantment has synergy that you can Grizzly Salvage or Mulch or any of those self-mill cards.
Yeah.
And this still affect because it's the entire graveyard. It doesn't care how the cards got there. It's just doing them at random. So I have a feeling this will be in some sort of Reanimator deck, whether or not it's what we see now, like whether Obsidat's Aid means it's more Planeswalker related or whatever. I have a feeling that you'll see it, and in that deck you'll have 4 Deathrite Shamans. You'll have other ways to get rid of cards in the graveyard if you want to cycle just to make sure that you're only getting back stuff you want.
I mean,
I think
else it's if you're paying 6 to mill 10. That's really the point of it. Now, the getting stuff back randomly, that's like, a 20% bonus on the card. You can't count on it, so you're never going to want to build a deck around something you can't count on.
Yeah.
But the fact that it's going to get a 6th of your deck into your graveyard, I mean, that's great for targets. And to me, it'll be curious to see how Reanimator does based on set rotation, because Unburial Rites is just so good.
Yeah.
When it's gone, does it slow Reanimator enough to where it just doesn't fit into the meta anymore? So, if it stays slower, I could see this. But to me, it's still probably only a 1 of, maybe a 2.
Yeah.
It's just, it doesn't, it's one of those cards, again, it doesn't do anything right away.
Yeah.
That's the trick.
If nothing else, people are going to play around with this in decks, at least in playtesting.
Yeah.
It'll find a home. I just don't know how much of a corner case it'll be.
Yeah.
But people have liked those Reanimator decks people play them in older formats as well. Like they're an interesting way to use your graveyard as a utility. Basically,
I can see this more in older formats probably because there's already so many cheap targets to directly pull, and you don't have to worry about things cycling out. So I can see standard maybe not caring, but maybe
it's too
modern.
expensive for older formats. Yeah, unfortunately,
Well, modern might though.
No, too expensive.
But Reanimator's about cheating stuff in. I mean,
no, I just mean like you don't see 6-cost spells in modern.
Actually, no. Sorry. Legacy tends to be a little bit slower than modern, right? Modern tends to be turn 4, turn 5, turn 6, game over.
It depends on the
A lot of the
deck.
time.
Legacy can be fast too. Legacy just has better counters.
Well, it's Force of Will.
Yeah. So, for example, Force of Will is an expensive spell, but it's because no one casts it for 5 mana.
Yeah. You always are just going to be. Was it you toss an island? I think.
But again, we don't pretend to know. Or it's a exile a blue card from your
Is it
hand.
exile? Okay.
Yeah. We don't pretend to know about the older formats. I just we'll have to see. This is one of those weird cards that
It will either be amazing or it will be completely useless.
the problem with a card like this is like it's a mythic, so you won't get it often. But if you open this in your pre-release pack, you're going to be like, you're going to look at your pool to see if there's any way in hell you can make it work. But you're going to realize there's no way that this would be better than just hard casting the creatures you have in your deck.
Yeah,
like,
6-drop, you just hard cast the creature.
You don't have Grizzlebrand and Sealed. You don't have Crater Hoof.
Well, this was not made, to be fair, for this.
Well, and
there's really only one thing that even makes sense. I mean, Golgari, you could do Scavenge, but Scavenge is a trap, in my experience. Because every time you're basically like wasting creatures to make one big creature, and then you're one removal spell away from having no creatures. And that happened to me so many times. Like, I don't really care if it's in my graveyard, because really, with Boros breathing down my neck, like, I want that on the board. Don't really care about it already being there to scavenge. I'd rather kill something and then scavenge it. So I don't see it in limited at all being, it's just not useful.
Yeah.
But I predict it will either be very highly sought after or virtually worthless. I don't see it finding a mid-range home. Someone will either find a way to make it broken in one of the formats, or people just realize this doesn't do enough. They're better milk cards, better things.
We'll see.
Anyway, next up, little Orzhov action. Debt to the Deathless.
This art is amazing.
It is very cool. It's a little creepy. It's like an emo kid's worst nightmare. But it's X, 2 white, 2 black for a sorcery, which says each opponent loses 2 times X life, and you gain life equal to the life lost this way. This to me's got EDH just written all over it. I mean, limited, it's okay, but you're only going to get a one-off bonus. The initial double, you're not going to get it for each of your opponents you're playing, and then gain a ton and have drained, 12 points of life. 16.
What I thought was interesting is, obviously, they didn't do a full cycle of, you had Rakdos' Return and Sphinx's Revelation.
Yeah.
They didn't do a full cycle where each guild had that giant X rare spell.
Well, to be fair, I think it was more of like a yin and yang thing there. It was sort of like the opposites.
Well, what I mean by that is this card almost feels like it would fit that cycle, because it's 1 mana away from basically being it's more expensive, but it's an uncommon. But it feels very much of like what Orzhov would do if it had access to that.
I bet this was probably developed.
Yeah.
Similarly,
it's obvious
they were.
It's not as good in those like those 2 cards are amazing and they see tons of standard
card
play.
damage and this card discard and damage and card draw and life are way more backbreaking than life
loss and life gain.
There's no secondary bonus, which is why this is not a rare or a mythic rare. So
I feel like that's a close. I can't think of it. It's you have life loss and card discard, life gain and card draw. This is life gain and life loss. So we need one discard, discard and draw.
Yeah, basically, then you complete the card draw, life loss, life gain cycle. Yeah.
But anyways,
I'll play it, and I mean maybe 1. I mean, I'd have to see it in action. I don't. It's too expensive to help even extort unless it's super late game. So maybe against the mirror, it's a great option. Something really slow. I would probably not mainboard it though. It just doesn't do enough. I mean, okay, you spent 6 mana to gain 4 life and drain 4 life. If you're playing Orzhov, then you could have played a crap spell at 2 and extorted 4 times for the same effect and gotten something that stays on the board.
So we'll have to see. It's probably better in Dragon's Maze as a silo versus the set as a whole, like the Returner Ravnica block as a whole.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's going to see any standard play just because like I said, Sphinx's Revelation and Rakdos' Return are just better spells.
Yeah.
But we'll see. Standard does some weird things sometimes.
Oh yeah, cards you completely underestimate. Just
be like, oh, this is format defining. We had no idea.
Oh, Hellrider. That's not a card. Yeah. Oh wait, it is the card in red. Hooray.
Up next is Deputy of Acquittals. It's a white and a blue. It's a human wizard, 2/2, has flash. When it enters the battlefield, you may return another target creature you control to its owner's hand.
That's amazing value.
It's amazing. It's a common, which means it's a fantastic tool for Azorius. I'd be more than happy to play a few in the deck.
You can practically Restoration Angel things.
It's a 2/2. It's a 2/2 flash for 2. The fact that his ability is a May means he's instantly better than like Keymaster Rogue, which you'd already play.
Yeah.
Like you have to return something.
The fairy, the 2/1 that made you bounce.
The interesting thing about his ability is like you're only going to return something if it's a way to avoid removal. If you have some sort of creature that has an amazing enter the battlefield effect and you can turn around and replay it.
Well, again, he's basically a common Restoration Angel. Now, don't get me wrong, he's not flickering, but at a 2-drop, 2/2 with flash, he's already playable for all sorts of tricksy reasons.
Right.
And now, yeah, block, bounce, bring back. And if it's a detain card or something like that, recast, I mean, it's stupid value. I think that's a great card. I would play.
If it was immediate, if it was flicker, I could guarantee you this would see some type of standard play. The fact that it's not flicker, it still could see standard play. It's just the 2-drop spot, at least in control decks, is already full of charms. Yeah. So we'll have to see what happens. It is good because
it's one of the best commons I've seen in this entire set.
You can avoid removal very well. So
yeah.
we'll have to see whether or not it sees any constructive play.
It's going to annoy a lot of people. Yeah. I'm going to do this. No, you're not. I get a creature, and you don't get to do that anymore.
Yeah.
Well, stupid blue. I hate you. Anyway, what I don't hate is Dragon Shift. Actually, I don't know. Maybe I hate it. We'll see. It's an instant, 1 blue and a red for card that gives you, until end of turn, target creature you control becomes a 4/4 blue and red dragon and loses all abilities and gains flying. So you turn your crap card into a 4/4 flying dragon for a turn, or if you happen to have 7 mana lying around, which is the overload cost at 3, 2 blue, 2 red, all of your creatures become 4/4 flying dragons until end of turn. Very cool, potentially. To me, it's just there's too much of a middle gap. Like, okay, getting a 4/4 dragon is cool and can be trick removal. It could potentially be a kill shot for 3, but I mean, for 1 turn you get a 4/4. Early, it doesn't do enough, and then you have to wait so long before the overload does enough. Just don't know if it's that good.
Well, is it, as someone that played it a lot, and did okay with it, actually.
I mean, combo. You comboed quite well with it.
Can do okay by dragging to the long game, because that's really, it has to win that way. You have to be able to overload teleportal.
But do you want this card sitting in your hand until turn 7? Assuming you drop it that early. Because to me, I'd rather have something else.
Well, that's assuming it's sitting in your hand.
Well,
it's one of those things. It's a feel-good top deck.
Yeah.
I mean, teleportal did the same thing.
Is the point.
Teleportal did the same thing.
Teleportal on its own, though, even at the cheap cost, was useful.
It only gives it +1/+0, though, and the problem it's
unblockable.
It's a better win. Yeah, but it has a lot of low-powered
turn 5.
It has a lot of low-powered creatures.
Yeah.
So
wasting
a card just to hit them for 3 just wasn't.
Teleportal to me is still way better.
Than it's distinctly better. I just mean that this, if you cast it, is better than teleportal.
Yeah. I mean,
for overload.
If the overload. See, I don't think so, because that's assuming they have no blockers. They're just 4/4 flying dragons, and it never really swarmed me. It was annoying things like a few walls. Okay, so you got 3 creatures, so it's 12 damage.
Right, well,
it could be
late. If they only had walls, then teleport would be useless. I'm saying they had...
Yeah.
I would have decks, you have 4 or 5 creatures, it's just they're all small.
Yeah.
If now they're big, then...
And again, it could be good, I think. It doesn't do very well necessarily against Selesnya. Boros has got plenty of flyers. Azorius got a ton of flyers. If it could do something else, I don't know. Tap their creatures. Something to let them get through. It's just at 7. I don't know if I'd play this. I'd have to see how other people played it before I probably would bother with it.
Yeah, I don't think it's amazing, but it's got those corner cases. It's like we talked about.
It's just almost uncommon in its ability, but it's at the rare spot. And maybe if it was an uncommon, I'd say cool.
I think it's because the overload, the potential there. You
don't want people with 4 of those in a deck for sure. That alone would be irritating as hell.
It won't see any kind of standard play, but
yeah. Anyway, Drown in Filth, more Golgari Filth. It's a sorcery. Choose target creature. Put the top 4 cards of your library into the graveyard. Then that creature gets -1/-1 for each land card put in the graveyard for the turn.
No, just land card in your graveyard.
Oh, it's in the graveyard? Oh, okay.
So you could already have 5 lands in your graveyard.
I should read these at some point.
So it's an interesting removal spell. I don't think it's.
I mean, it could be interesting for Reanimator only because your potential removal plus mulching, basically.
Yeah, the fact that it's not instant speed means it's strictly worse than Grizzly Salvage.
Yep.
But
isn't mulch a sorcery?
No, mulch isn't.
They're both instant.
Yeah.
Okay.
But the fact that it's potential removal is definitely interesting. The fact that it also...
we are going to lose mulch.
Right.
So, at the 2-drop spot, if you're looking for a companion to Grizzly Salvage, it does fit nicely there. So, this could be a supplement to Reanimator a little bit, thinking long term.
Yeah, the other only downside that I think might prevent it from seeing play in Standard is that you have to choose a target. So if they don't have a creature, you can't play it.
That's true.
So
you get some mid-range decks. Could be a little tricky, but right now, the Standard meta is pretty creature-heavy. So, that's...
Yeah, but the Esper Control is still a thing. They don't always have a creature on the first 3 turns.
Yeah.
So the problem is...
Well, to be fair, though, this does get a little bit better a little bit later. Just because, in a sense, the more you have in your graveyard. Even if you don't do this right away. Like, Grizzly Salvage first, then do that.
So I think if the Reanimator decks play this, they won't do a 4 of like they do with Grizzly Salvage.
Maybe 2 or 3.
Maybe 2. But yeah, I'll have to play. The problem is that Grizzly Salvage in Reanimator is always good.
Yeah.
There are a lot of situations where this card would be bad.
Yeah.
So we'll have to see.
Next up is the most hated card of this set, and probably one of the most hated cards recently, as far as just disappointment. It's Amara Tandris. She's a 5/7 legendary elf shaman for 5, a green and a white. She's supposed to be one of the champions, but her ability is just that you prevent all damage that would be dealt to tokens you control. If you don't know the story behind this, long story short, the initial run of champions was a mixture of mythics and rares, and they decided they wanted to all be equal rarity. But they didn't want mythic because then no one would ever get to play them, which would kind of ruin the flavor of Dragon's Maze. So they've had to bump them all down to rare, which meant the card that she was supposed to be, which was...
Voice of the Resurgence.
Yeah. Which is stupidly awesome, would have been ridiculously rare. So they basically just swapped the mythic for the rare and end up creating a card that just doesn't sort of match the oomph or the fun factor of the other champions.
And an interesting flavor perspective, in the background of Imara, you can actually see an elemental creature like towering in the treetops. Voice of the Resurgence creates the token that actually has that on the art. So it's kind of like...
We'll come back to Voice of the Resurgence, but we're making the comparison. So Voice of Resurgence is an elemental creature. It's a green and a white for 2/2. Whenever an opponent casts a spell during your turn, or when Voice of Resurgence dies, put a green and white elemental creature token onto the battlefield with this creature's power and toughness are each equal to the number of creatures you control. It's fantastic value. Makes control hurt.
The fact that those mid-range decks that love green and white are going to have 3 or more other creatures.
And they like a lot of combat tricks on your turn, Restoration Angel, things like this. That's going to hurt them a lot. I can see why it's mythic, and I can see why they couldn't make it the rare spot, but I just wish they had done something like drop her power. I don't know. She's so late game. It's sad. I mean, I see why people are upset. Obviously, it's a little...
If tokens was a very strong deck, like where most of your deck are tokens, then her ability would be global enough that it would be awesome and relevant.
Yeah.
But the problem is that even token decks that exist in Standard right now, Esper tokens being one of them, token producing cards like Sorin, like Lingering Souls, they're not technically the bulk of the deck. They're just an engine to win.
Yeah, and they're also played so much earlier. You've probably already lost a ton of them, so by the time she hits, now you have a few left, which isn't bad. I mean, I'll take indestructible creatures, basically.
But she's just not amazing. She doesn't affect the board enough. I highly doubt she'll see Standard play, thinking about this after I wrote out about her and stuff.
Yeah.
But Voice of the Resurgence, however, we'll see tons of Standard play.
Yeah, that card is awesome.
We'll talk about him later.
Next up, way better champion, totally, is Avaxa Rakdos Blood Witch, who is a 3/3 for 2 black and red, with first strike and haste and unleash, and she makes it so that any other creature you control with +1/+1 counter on it has haste. I am in love with this card, basically. That is, again, so on flavor for Rakdos. It makes Rakdos have a little bit more oomph, because every little crappy card you drop now with Unleash is also, I mean, you can do a Splatter Thug on turn 4 or 5 or whatever, and it's a 3/3 first strike haste. Well, that's a lot nastier now. Holy crap!
I just thought of something as well. An interesting thing about her viability in Standard if there are enough, at least until rotation happens, creatures like Pyreheart Wolf and Young Wolf and other things with Undying, they come back and they can immediately swing. The only, because the only one right now with Undying and Haste is Strangleroot Geist.
Yeah.
So this essentially makes all of those other little guys.
Most of your stuff is either died on the attack or the block by the time they're back.
Huh?
Like most of your stuff is either died when you attacked last turn.
Oh, I mean mainly like in response to removal or something. But
yeah, I mean it could be interesting. It's just I don't think that will help because if they're attack, unless they did it before combat, tried to remove before combat, in which case you target her, not something else.
Yeah.
But I mean it is a potential bonus for sure. But anyway, I would love to crack her. She just looks like a lot of fun. I mean, she's just super Rakdos, and I was always a fan of Rakdos because Rakdos is just straightforward, no thinking. Throw creatures down and swing, because that's all you've got.
Hope you can get there.
Yep. Best game I've played out of this entire block so far was using a Rakdos Charm after a 5 series sequence of events mid-game to do the perfect amount of damage to kill him and leave me at 1. It was awesome, because Rakdos is just all sorts of crazy. You're going to hurt yourself a lot, and you just hope you don't do it too much. Anyway, my love for Rakdos aside.
Next is Feral Animist. It's a 1 green and red for a 2/1 Goblin Shaman. You pay 3 colorless, and he gets +X/+O until end of turn, where X is its power. He's interesting. Obviously, he's a good Blood Rush target.
I don't think it's that so much as he's the card that you're afraid to block. And so you can do the whole thing where you swing in. Doesn't matter. You got no cards in hand. What are you going to block with? Because if you have anything, I'm going to make him a 4/1. Or maybe even a 6/1. So he's one of those cards where it's like the Frostburn weird. You swing in as a 1/4. Oh, no blocks? Cool. Now he's a 4/1.
Right.
This to me is that same flavor. Could be good on the block in a pinch. You can always obviously throw him out there. Obviously, I mean, any target's a good Blood Rush target in my opinion, because Blood Rush makes any target lethal. But I think he'll be interesting. I think he gives a little bit of that annoying thought process to a static creature. You don't have to worry about cards in hand. Does he have Blood Rush? Well, maybe I do. Maybe I'll do that instead of his ability. But either way, you're always going to have to think about what you do with him. Do you let 2 through? Or is it 4 through? Or is it 6 through? I don't know. Crap, do I block? Do I lose my creature? That's fun. I like messing with people's heads like that. With a little 2/1 Goblin.
And Gruul's good about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, next up is another weird. Speaking of weirds, it's Flux Charger. He's a 1/5 flying for 2, a blue, and a red. And whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, you may switch Flux Charger's power and toughness until end of turn. To me, I'd rather have my Frostburn weird back. He's cool. I mean, he's a little interesting. You can combo with him nicely. You can choose to swing in.
He has a block. He has evasion.
Yeah.
And the fact that you may switch, the fact that you don't have to, is pretty key.
There's a lot of potential there.
Yeah.
Again, conditional potential is a problem for me a little bit, but there is so much comboing in Izzet that I see it. This will be a threat. If nothing else, it's a 1/5 flying guy with a big butt. You're going to stop all the Azorius flyers. You're going to stop Boros. So he's a utility card with the potential for some serious damage. I've got no problem with that, and I would definitely pick him up, I think, if I was in Izzet.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'd splash for him or anything. And obviously no standard viability at all. But
not at all.
Unlike Gaze of Granite, which actually I think could be kind of interesting. Sorcery, X, 2 black and a green. Destroy each non-land permanent with converted mana cost X or less. This could be interesting.
Yeah, it's a weird, almost kind of board wipe, but it's a bit expensive depending on what you're trying to kill. But the fact that board wipes don't exist in these colors currently,
well,
is
the fact that
interesting.
you get to pick the poison basically, so you can either, just slip it in to get or do something evil like token decks. X can be 0. Done. Wipe out all the tokens. Don't lose a thing.
Well, and it's X or less, so if you, let's say they have a Liliana and a couple mana dorks, you do it for 3, where X is 3, you're killing everything.
The fact that you can get rid of all the enchantments, artifacts, and planeswalkers is a really nice thing. I mean, you can indirectly get rid of annoying, auras and things like that. It's got a lot of versatility. I would not be surprised if that ends up in sideboards.
Yeah, it'll be a sideboard card for sure.
And obviously, removal is always good and limited. So yes, if you're going Golgari, which I mean, you've already made a horrible mistake, but assuming you're doing that, yeah, pick it up for sure. What's next?
Gleam of Battle. It's 6 mana cost enchantment for a red and a white. Whenever a creature you control attacks, put a 1/1/1 counter on it. Although it's a bit expensive, it does have an interesting bit of upside. We've talked before about cards like what's that card? It's a Boros 5-cost rare enchantment.
Oh, Assemble the Legion.
Assemble the Legion.
Yeah. Starts crapping out tokens like a mofo.
Boros, at least with the vanilla commons and stuff, doesn't have as much late game. You have to get into the uncommons and rares to have an amazing late game, and this is a perfect example of that. It's when
it's self-sustaining, which is good. It's like Assemble the Legion, which is fine, and the fact that you get the counter before blockers are declared is great. Again, with Boros, so the problem is you needed this 4 turns earlier. Like, you needed it when your 2/2s were dying to blockers or starting to die to blockers. Because especially if you're doing this turn 6 on an optimistic thing, saying you haven't missed a land drop, like, it doesn't matter if your 3/3 becomes, or your 2/2 becomes a 3/3. Simic's already got stuff that's way bigger than that. Or Gruul is already populating the board with a bunch of stuff that at least will match it.
Well, it gets around deadlocks, because Assemble the Legion essentially did the same thing.
Yeah.
And I've won many games with Assemble the Legion sees standard play.
Well, Assemble the Legion also, it has the advantage of being like exponential in its growth, right? Because it doubles the tokens every turn. So
it doesn't double it, it increments.
I thought it was double.
No,
it
just adds a counter, spits out that many tokens.
But yeah, but it's the fact that this is conditionally good. Now it's uncommon, so I mean it's not supposed to be amazing.
Yeah.
But the fact that you have to commit to an attack, so it's great. Maybe if you have a trick, if you have like the populate card that makes all your stuff indestructible. Yeah, great, sweet. So there are plenty of combos that will make this.
And you don't have to attack with all your creatures. It's just whatever you're attacking with gets bigger.
Yeah. So you can pick and choose. It doesn't fit Boros quite well enough on tempo, and that's my major concern. The only good thing is, especially in like drafts, Boros is still going to be sought after. I have no doubt about that because people like fast. It has burn. It has removal. So hopefully, unless you get the nuts Boros deck, you'll be hitting this with your 3rd color, and it will make your stuff like in Gruul, sure. If I'm doing the Goros thing and I got Gruul on this in this deck, awesome. I will play this. But just a little off flavor as a Boros card, which is ostensibly what it's been designed to be, as it's a red-white card. But I don't know. It'll be interesting. I will, again, probably put that in, just a one-of, obviously. But
yeah,
could definitely break a stalemate. Unlike Goblin Test Pilot, which is such a ridiculous card. I feel like this was someone dared to make this. It's an 0/2 with flying for 1, a blue, and a red. And you can tap it to have it deal 2 damage to target creature and player chosen at random. I can hardly imagine why you'd ever want to spend 3 mana on that. But sure. If it was an 0/3, or maybe at least stop your basic 2/2 flyer, fine.
Or a 1/2, come on.
Give him... He can't trade... Anyway, that's all I have to say about that. It is just a weird card, and I feel like it was designed on a dare. I bet you won't make a card that ridiculous. Watch me. Print. Done.
We haven't had too many flying goblins recently, so...
There's no reason. Apparently they're terrible at it. Anyway, Gruul War Chant, next up. It's enchantment, 2 red, green. Each attacking creature you control gets +1/+0 and can't be blocked except by 2 or more creatures. Hell yes, I want this card. With a threat of Blood Rush and you got to commit 2 blockers to it, that's nasty.
Well, and already giving them a slightly better power is sick. I mean, playing as much Gatecrash as I saw,
it'll break chump blocking a little bit.
One of the biggest reasons why Madcap Skills and Ripscale Predator and stuff tore up those stalemates or completely decimated a board was because you had 4 creatures, they had 4 creatures. Suddenly you Madcap Skill something and you're threatening to either deal them tons of damage or they have to unprofitably block with 2 of their better creatures. Or
Yep.
so this sets up some really interesting combats.
I think it's going to be a very, very good card, and I assume I will get my butt handed to me by it at least once. But hopefully I'll hand more people their butts, so that's fine. What else? What else?
Haunter of Night Vale. It's a 3 blue and a black. It's a 3/4 spirit. Creatures your opponents control get -1/-0. If this had flying, I could see myself playing it.
The no flying's a little hurtful.
And the fact that it's not -1/-1, because then, and I realize that might be too powerful. It's just there are a lot of 1 toughness creatures in this block.
Yeah, they can't do that because, like, I mean, you would like.
But the problem is the
board.
power level being just a 3/4 on the ground for 5. It's not high enough to make this a high pick.
Make it a 3/3 with flying. I'll take the butt off of it.
Yeah.
But I mean, if you're in Dimir,
I always hate spirits that can't fly. It's like you're a spirit. You're not tied to our world. You should be able to.
Not all spirits have the same IQ level, obviously.
I guess.
Anyway, a better 5-drop would at uncommon is Jalen Sphinx, which is 3, a white, and a blue. You get a 1/5 flying vigilance, and whenever it attacks, other attacking creatures get +1/+1 till end of turn. Fantastic.
Yeah.
Put that in a Boros deck.
Or the Azorius Flyers deck.
No.
You've got all these small.
Well, they both
flyers.
suffer from the small butt syndrome, where they just can't take much damage. And
So
this is a great way to have a big dude who stays back as a wall, but still buffs everything, and you still get to bash with him.
Yeah, for 1 every turn. He's a great target for enchantments and.
Yeah, very, very good value there, and I would definitely play him if he's on color.
Yeah.
No other use, though. No standard, no whatever. But really good and limited, that's for sure.
Yep. Next up is Karazda Gorgon. 3 black and a green, a 2/5 with Death Touch. You pay 2 colorless, remove a counter from a creature you control. Target creature gets -1/-1 until end of turn. It has interesting synergy with Simic and Golgari.
Yeah, if I'm doing the Simic Dimir blend, yeah, this could be interesting to me more, because I don't want to worry about Golgari trying to scavenge. It's too expensive. But if you can do Simic, where you're getting free counters, basically, and then remove them for removal.
Well, I actually like Golgari, so I would see myself playing it there. But anyways, the point is being able to do the counters for removal, and the fact that she has Death Touch. There was that other Zathrid Gorgon from M13 that just, basically
In limited, it wrecked people.
People were scratching their heads. They're like, how the hell do I remove this? They're like, in that case, they were turning everything you owned into defenders. In this case, they're going to try to set up an engine so that they're removing every single creature you have, and it can be pretty interesting for sure.
Yeah.
I think it'll be most interesting, like I said, if you're doing Golgari, Simic, whatever the.
Yeah, I'm thinking Dimir Simic more. Where you're sharing the black with the blue and the green on that side.
Well, it's the same colors either way.
It's the same colors, but I'm just saying...
This is a Golgari card.
Well, I know it's a Golgari card, but I just think that, again, Simic gives you free. Whereas you always have to pay basically twice to get to your counters for Golgari, because you got to let it go to the graveyard.
Yeah, I said Simic. I said Simic and Golgari.
Oh, yeah. Well, again, I think Dimir more just because I like the removal and I like the flyers.
What I'm saying is if you're in those 3 colors, you're going to be in all 3 guilds.
Well, yeah, I mean, you'll be picking the best from all of them.
Yeah.
But I guess what I'm saying
is... You're splitting hairs.
I'd be more happy to try and blend her into a Simic deck than I would be trying to blend her into a Golgari deck, is what I'm saying. As your base, as your core, just because I like the way the counters are produced as a bonus in Simic as opposed to a paid service, as it were.
Well, because if you're removing them, they're constantly reappearing as you're dropping creatures.
Yeah. So to me, it's
more of an engine.
Yeah, which is just interesting. Also interesting, also at uncommon, is Krasis Incubation, which is a aura for 2, a green and a blue. Enchanted creature can't attack or block and can't activate any of its activated abilities. And you can pay 1, a green and a blue to return it to your hand. But you do leave 2 +1/+1 counters on the creature you did it to. I like it because obviously Simic was a little lacking on control or direct control.
Pseudo removal, yeah.
The fact that you could actually use it profitably on your own creature, just late game, you're kind of in a stalemate, you can start doing it to your own stuff and making them bigger every time is potentially useful. And there's so many ways to combo in Simic with counters that any engine you have that can consistently do it. But you are paying at that point 7 for 2
just to drop it and return it.
So,
right.
You know, you definitely wouldn't want to have to use it that way. But, you know, if you just are going to leave it be, it's 4 for what's just like, was it 1,000 lashes in effect. So I love to play that card. Of course, the pinging was nice to slacks that. But otherwise, you know,
still play it.
It's very useful, especially in Simic, which has very little.
Next up is Lavinia of the 10th. 3 white and a blue. It's a 4/4. Human soldier, protection from red. When it enters the battlefield, detain each non-land permanent your opponents control with the converted mana cost 4 or less. What I found interesting about the 4 or less part and the fact that it's non-land permanents is...
It also should be 4 or fewer. I just want to point that out.
It turns off their... key runes, their clue stones, you know, any other random artifacts they have. This likely won't see play in standard, but and then
but she can end a game. I mean, she can basically lock down an entire board state. You might have one creature, and then you swing for the win with your smaller guys. So she's a bomb. The fact that it's a one-off effect obviously means it's a little tougher. You got to know when to play her.
She does pair with that 2/2 flash, return a creature to your hand, though.
Yeah, it's not quite as awesome to me, you know, as far as usability as like what's her name?
What I like
Avaxa, because you know she stays a 4/4 per strike, you know, with haste, and then also gives all of your other +1/+1. Like it's a global effect. Well, not global. I guess
the fact that like she has protection from red, which is relevant, just because she avoids some of the burn, and she can
chain lightning or whatever it is.
She can basically stop the Rakdos, Gruul, and Boros. So, like I said, protection in standard as a whole is pretty uncommon. So the fact that we're seeing it in some of these Dragon's Maze cards is interesting.
Yeah. But next up, Legion's Initiative. It's an enchantment, mythic for red and white. Red creatures you control get +1/+0. White get +0/+1. And then you can pay red and white to exile it. You will then exile all creatures you control. And then at the beginning of the next combat, return those to the battlefield under your control, and they gain haste. I can't see why I wouldn't play it. I mean, especially if you're in Boros at all, in those colors, it's just good value. And then the fact that you can avoid removal potentially without sacrificing, you know,
blockers and stuff.
Like that, potentially very, very good. So I see why it's mythic. A couple of these in a draft, that'd be...
this is a card, I've read some conversations on Reddit, and this is a card that's interesting and cheap and effective enough that it could see some random corner play in older formats as well.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that it'll see play in standard. I feel like it's effective in standard, but unfortunately enchantments in general don't do well in standard.
No.
But we'll have to see. It'll see some crazy uses coming up, I'm sure. But
more interesting, just same rarity and yet far more salivatingly worrisome is Master of Cruelties, which is a 1/5 first strike death touch demon for 3 red and a black. He can only attack alone, but whenever he attacks a player and isn't blocked, that player's life total becomes 1. And then no combat damage is assigned. So what's interesting is it doesn't even get to combat damage. As long as he's not blocked, it happens, which it's a little interesting addition, I think.
Yeah.
And especially when you have cards out there like Rogue's Passage and stuff where you can get him through. There are ways to make this guy happen. You're either going to make them trade a creature pretty much every turn, because first strike death touch combo is just nasty, or they're going to take themselves to 1. The only worst case scenario is when they're already at 1, and then his ability goes off, putting them back at 1, and he does no damage. That's sort of a weird, not going to happen sort of scenario.
Yeah, hopefully you've got something else that can get through there at that point. But he's going to be crazy to play with, and he's pretty powerful.
Yeah.
He's a great blocker, if nothing else.
Yeah. Mauve the Obsidat, next up. It's a 3/3 Thrall for 3, a white and a black. And you can sack a creature, and creatures you control get +1/+1 till end of turn. I see this being very useful for Orzhov, just because sometimes you do end up with those little guys who aren't doing much, don't have extort, not going to get through because of the current situation. Sack 2 or 3 of those, and you're swinging for lethal with a bunch of nasties.
Yeah,
so.
or sometimes you sack a creature in response to removal, just to make this guy bigger so that they can't profitably attack you if it's pre-combat.
Just a lot of flexibility.
The art is also very interesting. He has teeth on his belly, and then he's grabbing people that are coming up a ladder or a set of stairs and just
they're jumping right into his gut.
And his gut chews them up because it
very, very on flavor for
crazy.
The craziness of Obzedat.
Next up is Melik. Is it Paragon? It's a 2/4 for 6 mana.
This is the Is It champion.
Yeah. 4, a blue and a red. It's a legendary weird wizard. The first weird wizard I'm aware of. Play with the top card of your library revealed. You may cast the top card of your library if it's an instant or sorcery card. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell from your library, copy it. You may choose targets for the new copy.
I like him.
Essentially, it's card advantage because you always have an extra card in your hand that's just sitting on your library.
You also know it's coming next, so you're pondered a little bit, basically. Constant pondering.
And you're casting it twice. So it can be very powerful. In limited, you have to have one of those Is It decks, Is It Azorius, whatever kind of combo you get off with a lot of instants or sorceries. And I drafted Is It quite a bit in Return to Ravnica, where I would force the instants or sorceries just to work with other cards like Lobber Crew. So he has the potential to be pretty powerful in limited.
And with Gutter Snipe could be a nasty, nasty combo.
Yeah.
Teleportal.
Twice. But we'll have to see how...
He's a little pricey is the problem.
Yeah.
So Is It's main problem that I experienced was that it has a hard time staying around where you're dropping 6 drops. So, yeah, he can start to combo great, but he's either like a win more or a stall card. He doesn't get you there any sooner, which I think is what they needed. But it'll be interesting to see the decks that people build around him. I imagine as an early pick, he'll be a lot of fun to build towards.
Yeah.
So that'll be interesting.
And standard, he won't. He might see random deck play, but first of all, he's legendary. Which I don't know if you know this, but the old legendary rule was interesting. If you had
whoever played it first locked the board down, the other person couldn't cast it. Yeah, it was
the new legendary rule is much better.
Yeah, instant destruction.
But the fact that he's legendary just means that you're not going to want to play 4 of in the deck, which is fine because I don't think any standard deck ever would want 4 of this guy. But I think you'll see random play. People will just be trying to create interesting Delver decks where he'll be the top end, where you have a lot of low-cost spells and Delver and Runechanter's Pike, and he'll just be the top end that when you get there late game, you're copying, you're double Azorius Charming, and it can get crazy. I think he could be more effective in standard than he would be in limited, but I don't know if he has enough enter the battlefield power or toughness. I don't think he has enough staying power to be great in standard, but we'll see.
Next champion is Mirko Vosk, Mind Drinker. He's a 2/4 flying vamp for 3, a blue and a black. So this is the Dimir champion. Whenever he deals combat damage to a player, that player reveals cards from the top of his or her library until they reveal 4 land cards, then puts all those cards into the graveyard. It's sort of like the aberration,
consuming
aberration.
Yeah.
One thing, if it goes off, you'll wreck your opponent, and you'll wreck them in no time.
The fact that he has flying means that you'll hopefully be able to get there, especially against some decks that just don't have flyers.
Yep.
And
probably limited, just tough.
In limited, you will usually mill your opponent pretty quickly if it's until they hit 4 lands. Because by the time you drop them and you're hitting them, they probably have 6 lands in play, which means they might have some in their yard. They only have 10 left in their library. Yeah. You're going to mill like half their deck just by hitting them once.
Yeah, and it's just good, too, because there's plenty of other ways to get those last few mills in, even if they throw up a blocker. You need him to connect once, and he's profitable, basically, for you, if you're going mill. But, of course, you got to go all in on mill.
Yeah, I think EDH players, all around the world will love this guy for random decks.
I could see, he's a little janky, but he's he's got enough of a oomph when he finally connects that if you're in that flavor for your deck,
yeah, he won't see any standard play. I can almost guarantee it. Mill is an incidental thing in Esper because Nephalia Drown Yard is a thing. Jace, mills you 10 for 0 loyalty, so he's not that good. But
next up, Morgue Burst, which is a sorcery, 4 black-red. Return target creature card from your graveyard to your hand, and then Morgue Burst does damage to target creature player equal to the power of the card returned this way. Interesting. On flavor again for Rakdos, and potentially really powerful. If nothing else, you're going to get a creature back to your hand and potentially deal, let's just say, 3 damage as a reasonable estimation. That's plenty of value for 6, especially since Rakdos tends to be petering out. I'm fine with that. I could definitely see me playing one of those.
Yeah, it's a bit pricey, but removal is typically pricey and limited. So
interesting.
Yeah.
Nivix Cyclops, 1/4 Cyclops Defender for 1 a blue and a red. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, he gets +3/+7 till end of turn and can attack this turn, so he didn't have Defender. Good as a card. He's the butt you need against Boros and Azorius early. And then later he can start to beat down as you combo the crap out of things.
Yeah, I mean, even if you play one instant or sorcery, some kind of removal, some kind of bounce spell.
Come in a 4/4, and you did something.
Right.
Yeah, that's
he's pretty strong. He'll go in quite a few as it decks. At least, I'll put 2 of them in there or something.
Yeah.
Notion Thief. 2 a blue and a black for a 3/1 human rogue who has flash. If an opponent would draw a card, except the first one he draws in each of his or her draw steps, instead that player skips that draw and you draw a card.
This is again sort of a screw you Sphinx's Revelation.
Sphinx's, all the Azorius Charm, like any Think Twice, Thought Scour. Yeah. Basically, if you're also a control player, and mainly talking about standard, this isn't quite as good in limited at all. But you flash this in there, you steal their card draw, and you have a creature still.
It could actually be kind of fun against a mill deck, though, because they go to make you draw, right? I don't know, so it has to be opponent. I don't know, so that was target player. I was thinking that'd be hilarious to turn mill on them.
Yeah.
Oops.
But it'll see standard play, mainly sideboard. I can't think of why you would mainboard this, but yeah, because you're going to steal their Sphinx's Revelation or their Charm or their Think Twice or whatever.
Pretty backbreaking.
Yeah, it's pretty powerful. Limited, it's just not that useful because there aren't a lot of card draw spells. So you paid 4 mana for a 3/1 flash, which is playable depending on your deck or if it fits in your curve if you need that 23rd card, but otherwise they're just better 4 drops typically.
Yeah. Good 5 drops though. Obsidat's Aid, 3 white and black for a sorcery that returns target permanent card from your graveyard to the battlefield.
Yep.
I feel like this is, here you go, we're sorry that Unburial Rites is going away.
Yeah, and this may not be the only solution, but what it does interesting, rogue deck builders like Travis Wu, for example, that love giant planeswalkers and enchantments that do crazy stuff like Omniscience. This can put an Omniscience onto the battlefield.
Yeah. This I see having much more versatility across formats, and it's powerful. Definitely limited.
Yeah.
Snag your best thing back, or any of the standard decks.
What I like to think
I
about
don't think it has
limited,
too much use. Maybe
I don't know if you remember Rise from the Grave in M13, but it's a 4 and a black, and you would return target creature card any graveyard into play, and then it becomes a black zombie in additions to the fact that you're getting your best creature back or whatever. You're usually not going to reanimate the same way you would in standard, but the fact that you get something back is usually pretty powerful.
This card will see play.
Yeah, definitely.
Unlike Pilfered Plans. Sorcery, 1 blue, black. Target player puts the top 2 cards of his or her library into his or her graveyard. Draw 2 cards. I saw a funny joke on Reddit where they're saying, here's how you design a Dimir card. Take a blue card, change one of the take one of the colors to black, and then just add mill 2.
Yeah, this is divination. I'll play one of usually in the decks if I'm happen to be in this color because I'm more than happy to play a card to draw 2.
Yeah, 3 for draw 2 is why you're playing it. The mill is incidental.
Yeah.
It's a good card. If you're on the color, definitely I'd take 1 or 2.
It'll only see play in limited because divination doesn't see. They're just the charms and think twice and thought scour. They're just so many better card draw spells in standard. So.
Yeah.
Yep. Next up is Plasm Capture. It is green, blue, a rare instant. Counter target spell at the beginning of your next pre-combat main phase. Add X mana and any combination of colors to your mana pool, where X is that spell's converted mana cost. So Wizards of the Coast created this card a long time ago called Mana Drain, and
it was just 1 and a blue, right?
It was blue.
Oh, it's blue.
And it basically did the same thing. The only difference is it was at the beginning of your next main phase. Add max. So basically, if you countered something, and then you had, combat. You only had the mana your next. This basically rolls it over until your next turn.
Yeah.
If you use it on their turn or whatever.
Yeah. It's more powerful far as a limited card because you're going to get to cast a creature with it, as opposed to countering something. Unless you have another instant speed, the mana was kind of
instants are a little bit more rare in limited, especially good instants. So this will definitely be pretty powerful if you can. The colors are a bit restrictive. Lazov Dimir Mastermind was sometimes hard to play because he was blue, black.
This is a 6 or 7 drop basically. By the time you probably have your mana base fixed, you could be turn 6/7 before it's useful.
So you usually play counters. The fact that you can counter it and have a bunch of extra mana is pretty awesome.
Yeah.
The art is awesome, and I think this will see standard play. It's just one of those cards that's kind of curious enough,
it feeds into a Thrag Tusk on the next turn. I mean, that's there's a lot of value to it, and you maintain your control state. So to me, it's interesting.
And in those decks you're playing it in, you counter their Thrag Tusk. You use that mana to main phase a Sphinx's Revelation.
Thrag Tusk.
You main phase a Sphinx's Revelation for 5 extra mana.
Yeah,
that's pretty insane.
It's got potential for sure.
Next up is
Progenitor Mimic.
Progenitor Mimic. It's a 6 cost. That's 4 green and a blue. It's a 0/0 shapeshifter, which if it didn't have any text means it would enter the battlefield and immediately go to your graveyard.
Yep.
But it says you may have Progenitor Mimic enter the battlefield as a copy of any creature on the battlefield except it gains. At the beginning of your upkeep, if this creature isn't a token, put a token on the battlefield that's a copy of this creature.
So basically, you take the best thing on the board, and then every turn you get another freebie of it.
Yeah, it's almost like Stolen Identity. The 4 blue cipher spell that basically you had to hit them in order to get that. This you don't have to hit them, so this might actually see standard play, especially when other clone effects have. Yeah. It's a bit expensive, but with creatures being as important they're going to copy, Angel of Serenity, and every turn they can have an Angel of Serenity, or depending on how combat and stuff goes. So it's an interesting card.
A bomb in limited, potentially playable in standard, probably nowhere else, I would assume.
Yeah, just a bit expensive, and they're better. We don't have Phantasmal Image anymore, which is a 2-cost clone effect.
Yeah.
I didn't even realize how powerful Phantasmal Image was until M12 was already gone, and then
too late. Anyway, Putrefy next up. This is instant 1 black and a green to destroy target artifact or creature. Can't be regenerated. Not much to say here except it's straight up removal at instant speed. So if you're on color or you even need to splash for it, I would probably do it. Good value, especially with artifacts being pretty important in this set.
It may
see runes and stuff.
I think I might have written in the article it won't see standard play. It may see corner standard play. The problem is they're typically better removal.
Doesn't even see play,
it's usually sideboard play, or if it sees main board play, it's like 2 maybe, like 1 or 2. So it'll see play. I just don't know how much. People do like instant speed, like blanket removal.
Yeah.
Where Victim of Night, like it can't be a vampire, zombie, or werewolf, but
you don't want conditions.
We'll have to see.
What about Ral Zarek, though, the new Planeswalker?
Pretty excited.
Comes into play with 4 loyalty counters. He's 2 blue, red, and +1 tap target permanent, then untap another target permanent. There's all sorts of, people are already trying to figure out how to break that. And then there's -2. He does 3 damage to our creature or player. So, he's a 4-drop lightning bolt, basically, if you need him straight up, on the drop. So, useful. And that 3, if it was 2, it'd be but that 3 is pretty powerful, I think. And then his -7 is flip 5 coins, and you get to take an extra turn for each one that comes up heads.
So yeah, let's talk about each one of his abilities. The first one, tap target permanent, and then tap another target permanent. You're probably going to tap one of their creatures most of the time.
Keep you on the offensive.
You're going to untap one of your lands, or this is where they've talked about comboing things like Gilded Lotus, things like Chromatic Lantern, things like Staff of Nin. These are artifacts that actually see play. And things like Staff of Nin, for example, you play him, you tap Staff of Nin, 1 damage to something. You use his ability, untap Staff of Nin, 1 damage to something. You're blowing up something with 2 toughness.
Yep.
With Gilded Lotus, it's just
stupid mana.
Stupid amounts of mana acceleration on every turn because you're +1ing him constantly. His -2 is interesting because not only can you bolt immediately, but if he's not dealt with, you can then bolt the next turn. So you've paid 4 mana for 2 lightning bolts across 2 turns if undealt with. So that's pretty powerful. It's usually
it'd be 3 turns because you have to drop him -2. Oh, I'm sorry, no.
You do it on the same.
Drop. Yeah.
And then his -7 flip 5 coins. Statistically, if you're flipping 5 coins, you're
probably getting at least 2 extra turns.
Right. It's 2 and some change.
Even 1, though, is fine because he's been doing a bunch of other crap for you. So
yeah,
good value.
The only thing I don't like about his ultimate is I don't know much about older Planeswalkers, but all the ones that are currently out, at least in Standard, and the ones that have recently rotated, their ultimates have it's like a known ability.
Yeah.
The fact that
randomness.
The fact that there's some randomness involved is a little unsettling, but at the same time, it brings that if you get the chance to ultimate him, the fact that every coin flip you're like, come on.
No, it'd be super fun to do.
Yeah.
But you gotta think though, it's a perfect blend of blue and red because his +1 is a perfect blue ability, his minus is a perfect red ability, and this is blue for extra turns, which is the only place you get that.
And red for random.
And red for random.
Right.
So it literally is just like he was the perfect child of blue and red, which is cool. Useful, obviously you play him if you get him.
And he'll see some standard play.
I see him being decently valuable for a while. It's going to depend though on how people find ways to abuse him.
Right.
So
and what decks he fits in and how much the meta
the decks
he takes
that
out.
he could be abused in just aren't viable, then he'll have virtually no value outside of just being Planeswalker. If you find a way to break him for a while or there's something in an older format, you can really just start comboing.
Yeah.
Sweet. Go for it.
That brings us to Reap Intellect. It's X2 blue and a black. It's a sorcery. Target opponent reveals his or her hand. You choose X non-land cards from among them. Search that player's library, hand, and graveyard for those cards with the same name as those cards and exile them. Then that player shuffle his or her library. This is an interesting, it's just like Slaughter Games almost. The only difference is Slaughter Games can't be countered by spells or abilities. And the fact that this can get more than 1 card.
Yeah. It's potentially very powerful.
Against control mirrors, basically, if this goes uncountered, let's say you have a varied hand, you have an Azorius Charm, a Restoration Angel, a Sphinx's Revelation, and 2 other cards in your hand.
Yep.
They've effectively stripped your deck of all of those tools. You can't win then. This is one of those spells. I think the reason why they didn't put can't be countered by spells or abilities is because this card has to be countered, otherwise it shuts down your deck.
Yeah.
It is a sideboard card, against
It's also at Mythic.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's designed to be scarce. But.
Yeah. So it is a sideboard card in Standard against those control mirrors, or if you're trying to get away, if you're playing against Reanimator or something, and you know exactly what card you need to get from them. It's a sideboard card you bring in once you know the tools that your opponent has.
Yeah.
Almost unplayable. It's completely unplayable and limited. I would never play this. I would immediately sideboard and go trade it in, or if I'm not going to use it or whatever. But
Render Silent next up. It's white, double blue for an instant counter target spell. Its controller can't cast spells this turn. Can break the aggro deck. Obviously, it's a counter. It's a hard counter, so you play it if you get it. I can definitely see this finding a home in Standard.
Yeah, and what's interesting about it in Standard is it's not only good against the control mirrors, but the fact that aggro decks have done so well. If you're playing against Naya Blitz, for example, you counter their even if you didn't counter their Burning Tree Emissary, if
They're not going to combo.
Let's say it's turn 4. You counter their Burning Tree Emissary. Even if they have another one in hand, they can't combo off because even though they have the mana open, this completely shuts them down. So
it's a dissipate with a bonus.
Yeah. It's not quite dissipate because of the exile. The exile.
I mean, it's the hard counter. Dissipate's, I think, the only one that's a hard counter right now. It's not dependent on being instant or sorcery.
Well, cancel is technically in standard. Just no one plays it because dissipate exists. So it's
that's how sad is that for?
Well, and there's counterflux. It's a hard counter. But there's this cycle of counterflux is interesting because it's basically the same thing. It's 2 blue and a red.
Yeah.
And it's counter target spell you don't own. It can't be countered. This was the Azorius version of that in a way. Yeah. It just has its own flavor on it. This is also the buy a box promo. So if you buy a box of Dragon's Maze, you get an alternate art of this.
Nice.
But yeah, it'll see standard play, and I like counters sometimes in limited. This is a counter that late game.
This is good for Azorius.
Yeah. Late game's pretty awesome because on turn 6 when they want to play a couple of cards.
Nope. Shut them down.
Shut them down. Now it's my turn.
Yeah. We got Restore the Peace. It's an instant, 1 white and a blue. Return each creature that dealt combat damage is turned to its owner's hand. It's sort of like a board wipey Azorius Charm, except you have to wait till damage has been dealt. So that's a little less helpful. But, this could easily blow up the aggro decks. It sets them back to basically scratch, against Rakdos or Boros. So it's powerful, and I see that being used very well. A lot like, what the hell is
Aetherrise?
Aetherrise, yeah.
Yeah.
The good thing about Aetherrise is, of course, you don't have to wait till damage is dealt.
Yeah.
Costs 1 more, but you're not in 2 colors, so I'd definitely take that over it. But this is right there under it for utility if you're on color.
It's interesting. The only other thing I don't like about it is you basically can't block because then your creatures go back to your hand as well. It's
you're right. I didn't even think about that. Yeah.
I'll still play it, or you'll find some interesting places. This is probably better early game than Aetherrise is.
Yeah, you're gonna do it when Boros is getting through and you can't do anything about it.
Yeah.
So build your.
It's another way to set off their tempo basically, because you always play this on their turn. You untap, you play some stuff.
Yeah.
You've set them off their tempo. And you keep going.
Tempo.
Yeah.
You got Rot Farm Skeleton, 2 black and green for a plant skeleton. Sure, why not? It's a 4/1, can't block, but you can pay 2 black and green, put the top 4 cards of your library into your graveyard, return him to the battlefield. You can only play that when you can play a sorcery. Interesting, plays into the Golgari theme very well. I don't know how much I really like him because he can't block.
Well, I like him. I like him better in multiples, and I feel like he's probably best if you're splashing Gruul, for example, because then he's kind of like Gravecrawler in the sense that you're always wanting to attack with him because you can usually always get him back for his mana cost.
Yeah.
If you're
splashing scavenge into him too, which is nice. I mean, you're gonna drop hopefully creatures into the bar.
If you're splashing Gruul into him, it just means that they, especially if your opponent knows, they might not block him all the time, or they might not, let you get that engine going. So he's interesting. He might be a little bit too slow, but Golgari is a slower archetype.
Yeah. Golgari's all about building, and he helps you get stuff in graveyard. So he's good for that. I'd rather attack with Rurik Thar, though, the Unbowed, who is the Gruul champion. He's a 6/6 Ogre Warrior. He's 4 green and red for a Vigilance for each creature that attacks each turn if able. And whenever a player casts a non-creature spell, he will deal 6 damage to that player. Super, super flavorful for Gruul. The fact that, he has to be a beater. Normally the problem is you're going to lose a blocker if you need him, but he's a Vigilance and Reach. He's a 6/6 for 6. I mean, he's just a beast. And I suspect that, even if someone tries to murder him or bounce him with an Azorius Charm, they're taking 6 for the privilege. There's just too much value there to not care. And since your own Blood Rushing doesn't activate his ability, he's just super handy. So pack one, pick one. I am going all in on Gruul if I can help it.
Yep.
I will reach for it.
He'll win some games for sure.
Yeah.
Next up is one of Michael's favorite cards that's been revealed. Savageborn Hydra. It's X, a red, and a green. It is a 0/0 double strike Hydra. It enters the battlefield with X +1/+1 counters on it, and it has an activate ability. You can play 1 and a red-green hybrid mana to put a +1/+1 counter on it, activated only anytime you can cast a sorcery. So turn 4, you're playing him. He's a 2/2 double strike, and he gets bigger. He's a weird. He's just like the Primordial Hydra, but with like red flavor thrown in, which is like the fact that he has double strike. And
I prefer the double strike too, in a sense.
Well, especially
he's a little more useful early,
especially because the tools that we have in this limited format, because we have Blood Rush. Yeah. Anytime you Blood Rush on something with double strike and trample, and you get all sorts of
a Rancor on them,
all sorts of craziness,
of nasty things.
And see, Primordial Hydra was already highly playable in limited, in M13. He'd won you games alone, so this guy will definitely win some games. He may even see some standard play.
I'm trying to see if I got a spot for him in my deck. We'll see.
We'll have to see how fast he is or what he combos with. Cards like Gore Clan Rampager, which he pairs with amazingly, already sees some standard play in aggro decks. So
nothing else. He's a mana sink for when you're not doing anything.
Yeah,
you got a turn. You don't draw that extra land. You're holding it in hand. You can pop 2 more counters on him. He's a continual threat.
Yep.
Scab Clan Giant, a 4/5 for 4, a red and a green. Not so much the threat. He does fight target creature and opponent controls at random when he enters the battlefield, which can be cool. The fact that he's a 4/5 means he's not going to die to much. So, he's not bad value, but I just don't. He's like He's basically a decidedly crappier version of the
Rage Beast.
Yeah, the Rage Beast, which at 7 did the same thing for a 6/6 that you could target, and then had the continued effect of any creature you played did the same thing. So,
yeah, this guy he'll usually blow up something because, like you said, most things aren't bigger. But yeah, he'd have to fit your curve to really want to play him.
You would need a top end.
Yeah,
if you didn't have it, cool, but otherwise. He's probably going to end up in my sideboard. Showstopper would not, though, if I was in Rakdos, which is an instant for 1 black and red, which says until end of turn, creatures you control gain. When this creature dies, it deals 2 damage to target creature and opponent controls. It's just super Rakdos again. I feel like Rakdos is the one they knew exactly how they wanted to design it. They went crazy with it. You swing in because you're doing Rakdos. You know you're going to lose stuff. That's perfectly fine. And then you get creature removal out of it. If this thing had target player attached to that thing, it would be nuts.
Yeah.
So obviously they had to back it off, but for a 3-drop, you can play it early. You don't mind that you're going to lose the stuff because you can trade for their big guy. It's just a really good card. I wouldn't run 2, but I think it would definitely find its way into most of my Rakdos decks if I was playing them.
Yeah, it's usually straight removal, so
yep,
definitely pick it. Next up is Sin Collector. It's a 2/1 for 3, a 1 white and a black. Human Cleric that when he enters the battlefield, target opponent reveals his or her hand, you choose an instant or sorcery card from it, and exile that card.
Again, screw you, Sphinx's Revelation.
Supreme Verdict if you're playing a creature-heavy deck. It's
just utility.
It's utility, and it's really... it's decent enough and limited that I would play it as a one-of. Just because you're usually with a full hand with a full grip of cards and limited 5, 6 cards, you're going to snag some piece of removal, and removal is so hard to come by in limited that it's pretty valuable. The fact that they also reveal their hand
it's
is
not just a card; it's all cards. So
you're getting information and you're exiling something of their choice, and the fact that it has a body is still important. He's
also a fairly cheap target for the the late game Orzhov Extort. He's only 3, so
yeah.
I think he's a very good one-of in Orzhov.
Yeah,
hands down. If you're in those colors at all, he's a good sideboard card for sure.
Yeah.
No standard playability probably, unless black white. unless Esper. I don't know. I just feel like they got to have better answers.
There are better options right now for discarding and stuff. Liliana is still in standard.
Yep.
She's one of the best discard outlets for Jund, and we still have cards like Slaughter Games, which already destroy your deck of whatever tool they want to get rid of. So that's quite a little bit better. But next up is Sire of Insanity. It's a 6/4 for 6.
pronunciation is instantity.
4 black and a red. It's a demon that at the beginning of each instep, each player discards his or her hand.
Again, super Rakdos. It's just like, screw your control. Screw whatever plan you had.
Is it Azorius, Orzhov, like, you know, basically...
Selesnya, even.
Yeah.
All your little populate tricks, things like that. And he's a 6/4 for 6. Yeah, definitely would play him.
Yeah.
Species Gorger depends, because you know, it's a 6/6 for 3, a blue and a green, and you get a Frog Beast, which who doesn't love a Frog Beast? Where at the beginning of your upkeep, return a creature you control to its owner's hands. So obviously this is going to combo into Evolve. So it's a super Simic card, or Azorius, which is why I like it too, because you can keep things detaining. You know, you can keep bouncing, was it Lavinia? No, what's her name? Yeah, Lavinia. And keep detaining everything. I mean, there's a lot of potential for comboing, and you get a 6/6 body in the mix for 5. So definitely playable. You know, one of probably, given the cost, but given the Evolve Trickery, Detain Trickery, I don't really know much else you'd want to combo it with, so I don't know if I'd reach for it outside of those, but plenty of potential, I think.
Yeah, he's interesting, and you know, like most cards, you can always, if he doesn't have synergy with your deck, then you don't play him in the main board.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, like if there's no way you can ever benefit from his ability, then you might not want to play him just because, you know, he's a 5 mana for 6/6. There might be better ways to spend your turn and stuff. But
Spike Jester, it's 3/1 with haste for black and red. It's basically a better Rakdos Shred Freak.
Yeah,
because you're potentially getting that extra point of damage in. Obviously, it dies to everything, but again, super Rakdosy, and then uncommon. Definitely going to fit in my curve, so I'll take it when I see it, if I'm in those colors. But nothing fancy there.
Yeah, that's about it. I know people on Reddit were talking about whether or not he was viable in any older formats or something, but they're better goblins.
It's just too easy to die. He just dies too easily.
Yep.
Tajik, Blade of the Legion, much harder to kill. He is the Boros champion. He's 2 red-white for a 2/2 that is indestructible. Any battalions for +5/+5. So
what I think is interesting, and the reason why I think he's only a 2/2 is his sword is bent.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's very hard to stab when you're getting like stuck on rib cages.
No, that's an actual type of sword. But yeah, the fact that he's a 2/2 indestructible for 4 is nothing to scoff at.
But next turn you're swinging for 7 basically, and it doesn't matter what they block with. So
and
super powerful and limited.
And he will probably see some sort of play in Standard because of that. Standard is very creature heavy. Usually you're swinging with 2 or more creatures anyways.
Yep.
So usually you'll trigger his battalion, and the fact that he's indestructible means he avoids most of the removal. So
yep. After that we got the Orzhov champion, Teza, Envoy of Ghosts. She is a 4/4 with vigilance and protection from creatures, which is super interesting. She is 5, a white and a black, so she's quite pricey, but I guess you get what you pay for. Whenever a creature deals combat damage to you, destroy that creature and put a 1/1 white and black spirit token with flying onto the battlefield. If she hits the board, bad things will happen to your opponent.
Protection from creatures means every turn you're going to be swinging from her with her unblocked. It means that they can't pit fight you. You know, it means that they can't profitably, most of the time, they can't profitably attack into you. And even if they deal damage, you're getting something out of the mix.
Yep.
The only thing I do have to, this won't see any kind of standard play most likely. It's too expensive.
It's a little sad. I'd rather it be a little smaller. Just so I could get her at a 6-drop, because then she might be able to sneak into a deck. But
limited, she's an absolute bomb. The only thing I have to say is her art almost looks like a modified photograph.
No, it's really awesome art.
It's weird. It's quite a bit more realistic than most of the other art, and I don't know if it's just I haven't looked at the other art from that artist.
Yeah.
But it almost looks like a photograph. It's crazy.
Yeah. Quality. We approve.
Yeah. Next up is Tithe Drinker. It's a 2/1 lifelink extort for a white and a black.
It has extort and it costs 2. Yes, I'm going to play it.
I'm
in that color and I'm doing the extort.
It's Value Town. The fact that we were more than happy to play paid 2 mana for a 2/1 lifelink in the past. This is...
I mean, there's the 2/2 bear, the Syndic of
Tides. This is very similar, but the fact that it also has lifelink means when you're forced to lose it, when you have to attack in with it, whatever the case, or if you're attacking in unblocked, you're getting extra life on top of whatever you're extorting. So it's pretty amazing.
Yeah, definitely like it.
Yeah.
Also like Trostani Summoner, which is a 1/1 Elf Shaman for 5 and green and a white. Before you go, that's a lot for a 1/1. You also get, with your purchase of a Trostani Summoner, a 2/2 Vigilance White Knight, a 3/3 Green Centaur token, and a 4/4 Rhino token with trample. So
effectively 10 power.
Stupid value for the cost, assuming you get to the point where you can drop 7 mana on something.
With Selesnya isn't hard.
No, this is totally playable,
and it combos really well with that Chocobo bird we talked about earlier. Yeah. Because if you drop her,
you just gave your creature +12/+12.
Yeah,
nuts. So yeah, not a whole lot of fanciness there, but it's pretty dang awesome.
Highly playable.
Yeah. Unflinching Courage, also highly playable in my opinion. It's aura for 1 a green and a white, and it gives your target creature +2 or enchanted creature +2/+2 lifelink and trample.
Yeah, and I'm not sure. I'm not sure.
Toss that on a centaur healer and watch him cry.
I'm not sure if you saw my my article about it, but this is basically a reprint of a card from Invasion.
Yeah. Armadillo Cloak.
Yeah. The only difference being that card didn't technically have lifelink because lifelink wasn't a keyword then.
Yeah.
Which in some ways is slightly better because all it says is when enchanted creature deals damage, you gain life. So if you gave it some sort of enchantment where it could ping something, then you would gain life every time. That's the only minor thing. Other than that, this is identical, and it's extremely powerful. It'll even see standard play. Because Bant Hexproof, like that Auras deck, is still seeing
it's just a ton of value.
Still seeing play. It's a slightly more rounded Rancor. Those decks will probably still see play Rancor just because it's so cheap and because it's recursive.
That's why you play it.
But this is just amazing.
Yeah,
giving anything trample and lifelink.
If you're
this
playing,
is exactly what
Auras, you're playing it.
This is exactly what Geist of St. Traff wants on him.
Yeah,
you want to make him a 4/4 hexproof trampling lifelinker that creates a 4/4 flying token.
Yeah. After that, we got Varolz the Scar Striped. He is the Golgari champion. He's a 2/2 for 1, a black and a green. Every creature in your graveyard gets scavenged for its original mana cost. You can sacrifice another creature to regenerate him. So I like him insofar as he super flavorful for Golgari. He's cheap. He immediately affects things. He changes the board state. So
he's really hard to remove.
If he was an early pick, I mean, I would definitely go that route, or at least make sure I've got the card. And if I'm going Gruul, I'm going to splash a little black, whatever it takes. Very, very good card.
The cool thing about going Gruul with him is when you Blood Rush, you can scavenge for that amount.
He's got tons of potential for combo.
With other creatures, he's basically really hard to remove because you're always going to, sack and scavenge on your next turn. As long as you've got creatures to fuel his engine,
you can't exile him. He's going to be
close to
be big and nasty. Yeah.
Next up is Viashino First Blade. It's a 2/2 for 3. It's 1 red and a white. He has haste, and when he enters the battlefield, he gets +2/+2 until end of turn. He's a slightly better version of Yeva's Force Mage, which was 2 and a green, a 2/2 that when he entered the battlefield, another creature gets +2/+2, or a target creature gets +2/+2.
What you're paying for is a 4/4. You're getting a 4/4 haste for 3,
right?
And then you keep a 2/2 for the rest. I'm sure that's all Boros all day. Definitely a good 3-drop. I don't know much else that you'd want to play for Boros because he's got.
And what I like about him is he has that you don't have that feel bad about playing him later in the game, especially if he's what you need to activate Battalion on turn 5, 6, whatever.
Yeah.
Because as a 4/4 body, you're swinging in with him profitably and only spending 3 mana to do so.
Yeah.
What you do after his first swing is up to you because then he's just a 2/2. Whether or not you can profitably swing is up to you.
But a 2/2 for 3. Yeah, with haste, it's still not that terrible. I'd take it in Boros Legionnaire or whatever.
Right.
Skynet Legionnaire.
Right.
Now, granted, flying, but
But the fact that he's a
good value.
4/4 and a sword, yeah, he's good value.
I think we've already covered Voices Resurgence awesomeness pretty well, but, you know, 2/2 for green and white. If you weren't there earlier for some reason, you skipped through half of this podcast. Whenever an opponent casts a spell during your turn, or whenever it dies, you put a green and white elemental creature token onto the battlefield with this creature's power and toughness are each equal to the number of creatures you control. Stupid, stupid value. Yes, yes, yes. Please, please, please. Keep it.
Yep, and he's full of value, and his standard implications are pretty strong because all the non-control decks are going to play the hell out of him, and even the control decks, if in these colors like Bant, will play him. You know, just because in the control mirrors, he's insane value. So next is Vorl of the Hulklade. It's a 1/4 for 1 green and a blue. This is the Simic champion. You pay green and a blue, tap, and then for each counter on target artifact, creature, or land, put another one of those counters on that permanent.
So you're talking exponential growth.
Yeah, and what's interesting is because it's so open-ended, the artifact, creature, or land, this card has a lot of potential to work well with older cards, in addition to things that are currently in standard. I mean, counters are always a good thing, but there are all sorts of mana-producing artifacts that do it based on counters. So this may see play in... I mean, Merfolk decks were already a thing in Legacy, so I don't know enough about the deck, but maybe they want something like this.
All I know is it's super Simic-y. I don't know if I'd care that much about him if I'm not already in Simic pretty heavily. You know, pack one, pick one. Yeah,
sure. If there's no removal or no better bombs, then hell yeah.
But you know, late game, I wouldn't reach for him. But he's got potential to end it on its own.
Yep.
Unlike War Leader's Helix, which is a terrible card. I mean, it's an instant for 2 a red and a white. It only deals 4 damage to a creature player, and you only gain 4 life.
So obviously they couldn't reprint Lightning Helix. They consider it too powerful of a spell. It's the same reason why Lightning Bolt doesn't exist in standard. This is just the more modern version. 4 damage and 4 life is obviously nothing to scoff at. I think it's unfortunately 1 mana too expensive from being amazing, or 1 damage and life gain away from being amazing. But it'll still see standard play randomly. You know, I don't know how widespread it'll be. And this is absolutely an awesome pick in limited.
Yeah.
You want removal, and 4 damage gets rid of almost anything. Gaining the life is just an added bonus of regaining any tempo if they happen to have already damaged you, or just getting ahead of the curve. So it's pretty awesome.
Unlike Warped Physique, which is an instant for blue and black, which target creature gets +X, -X until end of turn, where X is the number of cards in your hand. At best case scenario, you're talking about decent removal. It's not terrible. It's just...
Yeah, the problem, we talked about worst case scenario. It's worst case scenario, you top deck this and this card's useless. So even if you play this, I would be very careful about playing and maybe just play 1. The problem is it's not...
If you don't have any other removal, go for it.
Yeah, but it's such a feel bad moment when you top deck it and you need removal, and it's nothing because it's the only card in your hand.
Woodlot Crawler, not much better. Same cost, blue-black, for a 2/1 Forest Walk protection from green. I don't really know what the point of this card is.
Well, first of all, kind of like Armada Worm did, this kind of looks like a penis. But secondly, it feels more like a sideboard card. It's just amazing against green, but that's it. It's not... You don't like a 2/1 for 2.
And the problem is if you're in green, you're also in Simic or in Gruul.
No, not that you're in green if your opponent's
I'm sorry.
in green.
I mean, but I'm saying, so as the person who, I can't block this 2/1 with a green creature.
Well, protection from green means it's a very profitable blocker as well, unless you can give something trample.
I would not play this. I would not pick this almost overall.
Oh, no. I mean, it's going to be a late pick because people shouldn't be picking this early. It's going to sit in your sideboard, but if you're against someone that's heavy green, you'll bring it in against some other 2/2 for 2 that this just happens to be slightly better at.
That's the only way I'd think of it. Zerta Ancient, 7/5 for 5. What? 3 red or green. And he has static ability of whenever a player taps a land for mana, that player adds 1 mana to his or her mana pool of any type that land produced. Yes, it's a 7/5 for 5, and you can potentially mana ramp the crap out of your hand. And if you're playing red-green, you probably want a lot of mana because you're trying to play big spells. He makes everything in your deck playable, and unless you're worried about like a Sphinx's Revelation, which especially limited, whatever, don't care. Yeah, all day, every day, I'll play this. Would almost see how it goes, but with Sphinxes in the standard meta, I'd be very wary of playing it. Great value, but his benefit to you is more of a benefit to anyone playing that deck. And he's, you know, it's not Hellrider, he's not Hellkite, so, but still limited. Hell yeah, all day.
He's interesting. The whole global effect is what will keep it out of standard. Yep. Generally, your opponent probably has better things to do with mana than you do, and the fact that it affects them before you is what keeps it from being standard potentially. But again, I've been completely wowed by standard before, just depending. So.
Yeah.
But that brings us to the Zurta Druid. It's a red and a green. It's a 1/1. Tap to add a green to your mana pool, which it's the only one that does this in standard currently. It's the only mana dork that provides green because Land War Elves wasn't reprinted in M13.
Yeah.
But whenever you tap it for mana, it deals 1 damage to each opponent. This is definitely an interesting and usually a high pick in limited. It may see random play in standard, usually in mid-range decks.
It is a human, so that's the main thing going. While Champion's still around and Naya Blitz is...
Yeah.
We
talked about this.
I think it could, because it combos well into Burning Tree.
I don't think it'll see play in Naya Blitz. It's too slow, but that's something we
should say. Things
on.
that are running Burning Tree, it has a chance. To me, if you're not, I don't think I care. But
yeah, Naya Blitz is too fast. But
with that sort of mana acceleration, though,
that
could be potentially very good, and you get a pinger out of it. So
in mid-range decks, you'll definitely see that mid-range decks already run mana dorks.
Yep.
So having a mana dork that can not only provide green but ping them is definitely a plus side.
When Arbor Elf drops off.
Yeah.
There you go. You have a home. All right, so split cards. They're back. I don't think they've been back since Invasion Block, but maybe they have.
Could be Ravnica.
Were they in Ravnica?
Yeah. I don't remember which set. It might have been the last set in Ravnica, Ascension. But they were there. They didn't have Fuse, which is a completely new mechanic. Which basically, one of the problems with split cards in the past is there are some split cards in which you would like to choose both modes, especially with the viability of multicolored decks in standard and limited. You know, this is a heavy multicolored block. So they tried to basically give you that choice with Fuse, which allows you to cast both halves, you know, for the total cost, basically.
Yeah. With the only real restriction being is it will always read left to right.
Right. So
they resolve in order from left to right. So if you're casting a card like the card we'll cover, I guess now, Alive and Well, if you're looking at it face up sideways, green, white. Green is alive. It's 3 and a green. You put a 3/3 green centaur token on the battlefield. It's a sorcery. Well costs 1 white, also a sorcery, and you gain 2 life for each creature you control. So you can pick either or if you do both, it will resolve centaur, then the well where you count for your life gain. So interesting, potentially useful. Wizards in development apparently was thinking they basically got a rare cycle and then an uncommon set. And the idea is that the uncommon ones are supposed to be really good utility cards. They'll fit into the decks of their type pretty well. There are 10 total at uncommon, and then you'll have 5 rares, which can be back-breaking if you fuse them. But given the fact that they're so expensive to do so, probably not going to happen very often. You'll probably use one or the other, unlike the utility cards at the uncommon spot where a lot of those are 5 drops.
Well, in the case of this one, the well is just 1 additional mana. It's like if you happen to have that extra white mana that you're not doing anything with, then gaining life, you know, like we've said in the past, is not...
It's not good on its own.
It's a positive added on to other spells. So this is an interesting card. It's something you'll play. Yeah. It's not the cheapest way to create a token, but again, the fact that if you have the incidental extra mana...
it can be really good in a Selesnya deck.
For a tempo, from a tempo perspective, gaining all that extra life could help bring you back, especially if you got knocked down super low because you're playing against Boros or Gruul or one of those aggro decks. So,
So next up, we got Armed and Dangerous, which is the Gruul split, because there's going to be one utility uncommon for each guild. So this is the Gruul one. Armed is red. It's 1 and a red for a sorcery. Target creature gets +1/+1 and gains double strike until end of turn. And Dangerous is 3 and a green. All creatures able to block target creature do so this turn. So useful, I think, very much so with the Armed. And you toss the Dangerous on there, and you're basically looking to try and wipe their board. So again, great utility out of it.
Absolutely.
Both halves are playable. Go for it. Let's break. Why don't we do this? Let's not do the rares yet.
Okay.
Stick with the uncommons. Well, we're gonna break. We've been going in order from card number
Numerical,
1 to here.
yeah.
We're gonna start now and just break that a little bit so we can just talk about the rares and their bombness at the end.
So we'll get a little bit down and dirty.
Wait, what?
Is that the next one?
Is that what this podcast
Okay.
is going to turn into?
Down and dirty is one thing that happens is if one side of the spell is a sorcery, unless I'm mistaken, the whole spell is a sorcery.
You'll always have same mode.
Down and dirty, they're both sorceries. Down is 3 and a black, and target player discards 2 cards. Dirty is 2 and a green. Return target card from your graveyard to your hand.
So very useful.
Yeah, Mind Rot, which was 2 and a black, discard 2 cards, pay a little bit more, to have a functional split card. The good thing about a split card is because it's giving you more choice. It's one of the same reasons why the charms from Ravnica and Gatecrash were so awesome, is because they're flexible.
Yeah.
Having different modes to a card is good for many different reasons.
Yeah.
And then bringing something from your graveyard to your hand can be interesting, especially if it's a Blood Rush card, if it's some kind of removal. The fact that it's not limited to creature card, the fact that it's just return a card to your hand can be extremely useful.
Well, you can always grab one of these basically split halves for the deck you're actually playing. So maybe you're not playing black at all, but you know that green could be great for a Gruul deck you've got going on. So
yeah.
Again, just flexibility is always nice.
Totally.
It's far and away the next card that we're going to talk about. So far is an instant. It's 1 and a blue. Return target creature to its owner's hands. Away is 2 and a black. Again, instant. Target player sacrifices a creature.
So we've got Unsummon, and the Edict effect, both of which are 1 mana more expensive than the one that currently exists in Standard.
Yep.
Totally, and both are extremely awesome, and this is highly playable. Returning creatures to your hand, either to save your own creature or to set them off tempo, is awesome, especially because in the case where this gets resolved left or right, you return their crappy creature so that when they have to sack a creature, they're having to sack a creature they don't want to sack.
Because again, it resolves left to right.
Yeah.
Totally fun. Lots of combo potential.
There's quite a bit of give and take with these cards, which is the name of our next card.
There are lots of ways to both profit. I mean, there can be some loss too, but we're getting ahead of ourselves.
With the give and take, they're both sorceries. Give is 2 and a green, put 3 +1/+1 counters on target creature. Take is 2 and a blue, remove all +1/+1 counters from target creature you control. Draw that many cards. So again, because it processes from left to right, you could, if you wanted, put 3 counters on one of your creatures and then draw 3 cards.
Pay 6 for 3, which is not good value.
It's not good.
But the best you could come is paying 5 for 3 with, I can't remember what it's called, but it was the uncommon from M13.
If it's what you need, if you need to draw 3 cards, it's interesting. Yeah. What I like is that because it's in Simic, it synergizes.
There's so many other
the
combos.
fact that it doesn't say remove 3 counters to draw that many cards, it's remove all counters. So you could have a Cloudfin Raptor, you run remove 2 counters to draw 2 cards.
Profit and loss, that's the Orzhov. We got profit at 1 and a white, which is creatures you control get +1/+1 till end of turn. Loss is 2 and a black, creatures your opponents control, and it is opponents, get -1/-1 till end of turn. They're at instant speed, so that's great. Super valuable combat trick, board wipe on Boros potentially early, or at least cull the herd a little bit. So very much like that card.
Very powerful.
Yep.
Next up is Protect and Serve.
This is Azorius.
Yeah, they're both instants. 2 and a white, target creature gets +2/+4 until end of turn. Serve is 1 and a blue, target creature gets -6/-0 until end of turn. Another sort of combat trick.
Not super thrilled with it because I think that the second half of Serve isn't quite good enough. It doesn't guarantee a trade, but it is utility enough. You know, you stop their big guy after a double block.
Because of the first half, I'll almost always play it, at least one of in a deck.
Oh, yeah. No,
The
you take
second,
it.
I feel like the second half, it's if they were willing to make a trade of some sort, that just enables you to not have to make the trade. So it's interesting.
It's
the first half is definitely better than the second half in this case.
Toil and Trouble up next. Rakdos, sorcery speed. Toil is 2 and a black. Target player draws 2 cards and loses 2 life. Great. Trouble is 2 and a red. Trouble deals damage to target player equal to the number of cards in that player's hand. Again, very Rakdos-y.
What's interesting is,
card draw good.
If you need it for the kill shot, you make them draw the 2 card. They lose 2 life, plus they get extra damage off of Trouble.
Yep. Basically, you could be paying 6 to do 4 damage, like straight up guaranteed.
Yeah.
Unless somehow they get an instant they can cast in response. So yeah, especially Rakdos late game, that 4 damage could be all it takes.
Right. And it could be the upside of,
But it also helps you in a pinch, and you can split the difference. So very, very good card. I would be all over that in Rakdos. It would maybe turn and burn with it. I'm trying here. It's getting tough.
Turn and burn.
With all the wear and tear of this, I'm not doing well.
Turn and burn is pretty interesting and might actually see a little bit of play in standard. And I'll tell you why in a minute. It's 2 and a blue, instant. Both sides are instant. Target creature loses all abilities and becomes an 0/1 red weird until end of turn. Burn is 1 and a blue, 1 and a red. Does 2 damage to target creature or player. The fact that it answers the things that currently have leave the battlefield effects, Obsidat, Thragtusk, Angel of Serenity, these things that you don't want to give them a token or you don't want to give them any sort of benefit. This, using both sides, allows you to not only make it lose its abilities, but then kill it right away.
Yeah, it's 5-drop removal or all sorts of trixies any other way.
So it's awesome and limited, and it may even see some standard play. In the very least in sideboards, if you just get annoyed by your opponent's mid-range Thragtusks. And then
after that, Wear and Tear, instant. This is the Boros one. 1 and a red lets you destroy target artifact. 1 white, destroy target enchantment. Way more conditional, super cheap, potentially very useful, but this might end up in my sideboard. Even if it's on color.
Yeah, I feel like this is the one that feels least like it's the only one I wouldn't main deck out of the cycle of guild ones. But it also doesn't feel the flavor. I understand of just destroying an artifact or enchantment, but I feel like there might have been other things they could have done.
Just like Boros is all about the attack, and they didn't play into that at all. No. It's like +1/+0.
I think they know every set has to have a naturalize of some sort. It's just unfortunate they had to take up the split card Boros spot to do that.
Yeah. But anyway, on to the rare ones. We'll bump back up to Beck and Call. This is a Simic Azorius hybrid here. Beck is sorcery. It's green-blue. And whenever a creature enters the battlefield this turn, you may draw a card. Great value there. Call is 4, a white and a blue, and you put 4 1/1 white bird tokens with flying onto the battlefield. So if you can pay all 8, you get 4 1/1s and 4 cards. Obviously, it's great value. Obviously, it's hard to pull off. But Beck, I think, is good enough on its own to potentially be.
And Call is good enough on its own.
Free card draw, or if you're going to do some populate stuff, it can combo nicely. Also, Call, 4 1/1s.
Well, I don't know if you know, but Beck has some interesting modern implications because there are so many ways that you can get free creatures into play. So you're essentially getting free card draw, and because of all the cantrips and mana producing artifacts and such, there's a lot of combos that can be done because of a card like Beck. Glimpse of Nature was banned in Modern, and it was essentially the same thing, just 1 green. So the fact that they printed this was interesting. But that's just a side note. It means nothing in Standard. This card isn't powerful enough for Standard, but it's interesting. Next up is Breaking and Entering.
This is Dimir and Rakdos.
Yeah, both sorceries. For a blue and a black, target player puts the top 8 cards of his or her library onto the graveyard. It's pretty serious, at least for a standalone card. Most of the Dimir stuff we've been seeing before was Incidental Mill, and usually not of this amount. So
it's kind of like, it's a slightly more powerful Mind Sculpt. But the thing, Mind Sculpt was sorcery too, I think. so it's at the same speed. Obviously, it's a little bit harder to cast because you have to blue-black, but if you're going mill, it's a good mill target.
Well, and the fact that it has another side is the biggest thing. So entering 4, a black and a red, put a creature card from a graveyard onto the battlefield. Under your control, it gains haste until end of turn. The fact that it's from a graveyard, doesn't have to be yours, is awesome. The fact that it gains haste, and it's not like it doesn't exile after play.
It's a permanent effect. It's back on the battlefield.
Pretty powerful.
But you are paying... To me, this is one I would not really care about all that often fusing, because, I mean, unless you're kind of on the desperate play to pay 8 to hopefully get a good creature out of their graveyard, or I guess yours, but I mean, pay 8 for that is... There are worse things in life, don't get me wrong, but I'd much rather just enter and get something good that I know.
Yeah, I would only break if you have the mana, nothing else to do. You happen to be in the blue as well.
I think you need to be on the defensive at that point. You know that you need to swing the tide. Then if you got the mana. But the problem is, for me, if you're doing Rakdos, it's really, really late game for Rakdos.
Well, yeah, I mean, you could be splashing red though. That's the.
Well, yeah, I mean, I know that. It's just, to me, entering, I think, fits that flavor more. Gets you your giant thing back if it died, or steals your thing you took care of with some removal. So interesting. I just don't think this one has quite as much synergy as Beck and Call, where you're guaranteed to benefit. Obviously, Rakdos and Dimir, a little less cohesive. But next up, Catch and Release, which is a Simic Boros. I'm sorry, that's a Izzet Boros hybrid. Again, sorcery. Catch is 1 blue and red. Gain control of target permanent until end of turn. Untap it. It gains haste until end of turn. Pretty standard active treason type stuff. The fact that it's a target permanent is great. You can snag a planeswalker. It's kind of like Zealous Conscripts.
I think that was the blue flavor that they did in this, because active treason, all those traitor effects.
They're already at 3-drop in sorcery.
And it's red. Yeah. The blue is like a little bit more of like a control flavor. So
again, I mean, you got... You do have Zealous Conscripts. Which
but he's the only one. That's what I mean.
Yeah.
Red is normally just creature.
Yep.
But
Release is 4 red and white. And the reason you would really want to fuse these, assuming you can swing 9 mana, is that each player sacrifices an artifact, a creature, an enchantment, a land, and a planeswalker.
So you're doing that whole thing where you're stealing something of theirs so that you don't have to sacrifice one of yours, and essentially you're
trying to swing the board state on the creature level. Well, I guess not technically. It could be anything. You get to pick whatever their biggest advantage is at that point. Probably creature, because it's the way the games work. But
like if you steal one of their lands, they're sacking 2 lands.
Yeah.
Like there's some interesting combo because you're stealing something of theirs.
Lands, planeswalkers, artifacts for mana production.
Right.
Lots of potential there. Which brings us to Flesh and Blood, which is a Golgari Gruul hybrid. Sorcery, 3 black and green for flesh. Exile target creature from a graveyard. Put X 1/1 counters on target creature, where X is the power of the creature you exiled. So basically scavenge, more or less. At 5, you get to pick your target. Blood is, again, sorcery. Target creature you control deals damage equal to its power to target creature or player. Right? Is it power, right?
Yep.
Yes. So obviously, if you can pay the 7, you snag something huge, put it on a creature that's already decently sized, and then throw that at someone's face or their best creature.
Yeah.
And at 7, probably one of the more playable ones, because it's the second cheapest, and it gets you a very powerful effect. You get a big creature out of the trade by buffing it with counters, and you either go for a kill shot with direct damage, or you kill some of theirs. Yeah. Blood on its own, too, is pretty decent in Gruul, because you can do it post-Blood Rush.
Yeah.
And wreck something. So you can get almost a double whammy. You get through with your Blood Rush, and then you hit him again, practically double strike him.
Yeah, it's a pretty big bomb in limited. Flesh is interesting. I don't think either side is good enough for standard, but
Blood would be the only side I think could work, but I don't think it will work.
Well, Flesh would be an interesting way to counter a Reanimator deck.
Because you can exile theirs, and you get the benefit. So yeah,
you exile their Grizzlebrand, you get 7 counters. They can't reanimate it.
Yep.
But unfortunately, I think it's too slow, and it's in the same colors that Reanimator is. So it's just not quite good enough for standard. But it's interesting to think about.
But we can talk now that we are at the end about how ready and willing we are to to play Magic all weekend at the pre-release. And hopefully play
Ready and Willing,
which is the last. I am just on fire with these. Yes. So Ready, this is the only instant at the rare slot for the fuse cards, or for the split cards. Ready is 1 green white. Creatures you control are indestructible until end of turn. Untap them. And then Willing is 1 white black. Creatures you control gain Death Touch and Lifelink till end of turn. So at 6 mana, it's a Bolt of the Archangel with untapping and indestructible.
It's pretty amazing.
And it's an instant speed, so you can wreck a combat phase. Just wreck. You could have already swung in last turn, leaving yourself vulnerable. Suddenly you untap all your stuff, throw up a bunch of blockers, gain a ton of life, and wreck everything on the board. Or vice versa, you do it on the. I mean, it's just stupid value. It's either half at 3 is great.
It's amazing, and yes, I think it could see some play in standard and like junk mid-range decks, maybe even Reanimator just as a trick, just depending on how Reanimator fares like pre and post rotation.
Yeah.
It's so powerful and it's cheap and it's an instant. That's the problem with some of the other ones. So
yeah,
we'll have to see, but we're pretty excited about playing this weekend, and
we'll do a recap of basically our experiences, any cards that surprised us,
probably an
decks
article
we
form.
Played.
Yeah.
Look for that. Article or podcast. I don't know. We'll see how we feel. I guess at the end of the weekend, how much time we need, or we want to. How much we want to rehash it, but I intend to be dazed and confused due to extensive amounts of Magic playing by Sunday. So hopefully you all have fun as well. If you do go out and play, do it. It's fun, it's casual, and it's a great way to know the set. And maybe we'll beat you there.
Nice.
Now, let's not end on that, please. Anything else? That was not very punny.
Thanks for watching.
I'm sorry I did this to you.